This happened to me about a month ago. Some context. I'm a woman in my mid-20s who lives alone in a cozy flat in the attic area of an old Victorian building up in the old servants' quarters where I belong. The design of the roof hanging over my window and the high driveway walls means that I get some interesting acoustics. During the quiet nighttime, the sounds bounce up from the whole long street, even from out of sight, and I can hear the footsteps and conversations of passerbys as crystal clear as if they were in the room with me. Yet standing down the drive, you can't hear them at all. It was almost 4 a.m. and pitch dark outside. I had been finding it hard to sleep properly the last few nights, so I was still up and pottering around to my PJs with the lights on. I had the window cracked and the blinds half open to get some fresh air in. I usually keep them closed if I have a light on at night. You can see right up into them from the street and houses across, which I sadly did not realize for my first couple of months here. Sorry neighbors if you saw me dancing and cooking my underwear. However, I was so flustered from not getting to sleep and desperate for air, I thought everybody else would be snoozing. I had done the same for the previous 3 or 4 sleepless nights. I had just made some tea and settled down to read a book when I heard my door buzzer ringing. I remember thinking it was odd that I had not heard anybody approaching yet, as I was just sitting by my window, but I brushed it off as being sleep deprived. Nobody who visits me ever rings my door buzzer. They call my phone, so I grabbed my phone to check if I had a missed call or something from friends or family, and nope, nothing. I ran to the window to look down at my porch, but unfortunately I could only see the steps leading up to it. The motion sensor light was on, and I could hear a strange scuffling noise. Then some thuds. I figured somebody had called the wrong flat by mistake and was probably drunkenly stumbling around. Even with my rational explanation, a strange sense of unease overwhelmed me. I felt on edge after I heard the thuds and turned my lights off so I could gawk through the blinds without being seen, but unfortunately couldn't see much. After a few minutes, the noises stopped and the motion sensor light turned off, although I didn't see anybody come back down the steps. I figured I'd either missed them in the dark or the person they were looking for had let them in. About 20 minutes or so, I relaxed and turned my lamp back on to potter around again. About a minute later, my buzzer rang again. This time it was ringing repeatedly as if somebody were aggressively holding the button down. I froze and stared at it for a while, unsure what to do. It was starting to get a bit annoying and I began to worry that it might actually be somebody I know who needs help. Why else would they be ringing my doorbell past 4 a.m. in the morning like this? I plucked up the courage to answer, albeit with a shaky hand. Hello? No reply. I can hear somebody breathing heavily through the phone static. It sounded like a man. Who is this and what do you want? Again, no reply. Just heavy breathing. I hung up thinking they'd got the wrong flat or the telecom was playing up again. I stayed by the wall phone for a few moments staring at it, unsure what to do. The buzzer went off loudly again and I about jumped out of my skin as I was so tense. Who is this? Why do you keep calling me? All I can hear is static again. Thinking I was getting ding-dong ditched, I went to hang up the phone again. Just before I did, I could hear a muffled voice and I whipped the phone back to my ear and demanded to know who it was. What was that? Let me in. Huh? Who are you? Let me in, please. His voice starts breaking into a panic. I'm not letting you in here. You haven't said who you are. Well, there are people coming to get me. They tried to jump me and I ran away. I'm not safe out here. Please, you gotta let me in. Let me in. Help me, please. Immediately, I noped the heck out and hung up the phone. There was no way I was letting a strange man into my building who wouldn't identify himself, especially as I had to leave the safety of my locked flat to physically go down to the front porch to open it. My gut told me that his story was complete BS, but on the off chance it was true, I was worried there was about to be a crazy fight in my driveway. I grabbed my mobile phone and dialed 999 as I ran to turn my lights off and shut the blinds again, peeking out through a crack. The man had been ringing my buzzer non-stop since I hung up, but shortly after I turned the lights out, it stopped again. The weird shuffling and thumping noises on the porch started up again as I explained the situation to the emergency operator on the phone. She urged me to stay calm and stay on the phone with her and said that the police were already aware something was happening. Somebody else in my building had also called earlier to say that a man had been trying to break into the front door after trying all the ground floors, windows down the side and back. It had a similar call a few nights before too. That explains the weird noises I kept hearing and why I didn't hear them approach from the street at the front. The noises had stopped now, but I was beginning to panic really hard. I asked the lady when the police would arrive. She said that they would send out a unit as soon as one of them was available. Yay, recent cuts to police fundings. And to stay locked inside. After 10 minutes of no activity outside and the motion light turning off, the lady said to stay in my flat with the door locked. Sure, like I was going to do anything else, and to call back if he reappeared. And they'd escalate it on their end if he made it into the building, and she ended the call. I sat by the window watching, and sure enough, a few minutes later the noises started again and the light below came on. I don't think he ever left, or he went down the side to the car park at the back. I still couldn't see what was going on because of the angle from my window. I was about to call the police again when a taxi driver passing by slammed on his brakes and shouted out his window. I stopped to listen. Taxi driver: "Hey you, what are you doing over there? I dropped you off from the other side of town about an hour ago." The taxi driver knew this man. What a twist. "Oh hey, I lost my keys. My friends live here and I'm trying to get a hold of them to let me in." I see the shoulder and the leg of the man come around the corner slightly. "You told me you were going home to sleep it off and wouldn't be causing any more trouble like earlier. I asked you to get out and you begged me to drop you off at home still, so I did, and now you're not at home." "I just said I had no keys to get in. I'm trying to stay with my friends. They live here." You could hear that the man was getting agitated and an edge was creeping into his tone as he lied again. "So why are you skulking down the side there making a ruckus instead of ringing the bell? What's going on? What are you really doing?" The man gets angry at this and storms down the driveway to confront the taxi driver. This is my first time getting a proper look at him. Although I could only see the back of him, he looked like a normal, well-presented young guy with brown hair, a black t-shirt, jeans, and trainers. I was surprised, based on his appearance, that he would not be somebody I would normally think to avoid late at night. I couldn't really make out what was said next, as they were both shouting over each other, but I could hear the taxi driver yell police, and the man suddenly leapt towards his car door. The taxi driver quickly screeched off down the road, leaving the man standing there swearing and seething. It was at this point that I realized I had been an idiot, frozen by the window watching this scene beneath me without calling the police to let them know he was back. I ducked down to pick up my phone, which I must have dropped amidst the commotion. As I spoke to a different operator, the man turned around and strolled down the driveway a little bit, but seemed to hesitate and stopped, staring up at the building. I tried to get a good look at his face, but it was too dark to make out much detail. He stood like this for probably 10 minutes, just standing there and staring up at my window, occasionally swaying from side to side. I knew rationally that he couldn't see me peeking out, but I could swear he was staring right at me and knew I was there. He stopped looking at my window and turned to stare at the door for a few moments. I was begging the emergency operator to get the police out here sooner, as I was worried he was going to try the door again. However, I think the confrontation with the taxi driver made him lose his nerve, and he was worried about police showing up. I could hear him make an odd huffing and snorting noise of frustration as he turned and left my driveway, slowly walking down the street and out of sight. I updated the emergency operator with the direction he headed off in and ended the call. About 10 to 15 minutes later, I saw a police car cruise by with its headlights off, heading the way he'd gone. Unsurprisingly to me, they never found him, as it had been too long and there were too many side streets and alleys around for him to slip away down. He didn't come back again, but I stayed vigilant by that window until sunrise, crying my little eyes out and chain smoking like hell. I didn't sleep properly for weeks afterwards, and I got extremely paranoid walking to and from my building now. I've stopped taking the bends down if the sun is even slightly setting. Luckily, I had already begun the process to move somewhere else for unrelated reasons, so I only have to live here for a couple of more weeks before I move to a big house with friends. I liked living on my own before this, and now I'm very grateful to be losing my privacy to have some backup. A shout out to the brave taxi driver who stops to confront him. You were more helpful than the local police even, and I don't know if he would have left if you would have not scared him off. I wish I could ask you what the heck happened when you met that man earlier in the night. First, I suppose I should supply some context. I'm a workout addict. I love to lift weights and run. I run about 12 miles a week typically, 3 miles 4 separate days. Every day that I run, I take the same trails that surround the lake in my hometown. These trails are relatively secluded. However, they usually have fellow runners and wanderers scattered throughout most times of the day and early evening. I always run through a particular trail that is my personal favorite. It is very close to my home, not even a half mile away. This past week, my local gym was closed due to renovation, so I filled my week with about twice the amount of running, as I could not lift. Because of my sudden increase in running, my tendinitis flared up. I always get overzealous and do that myself. This will come back into play in a bit. Now, I'm hoping I'm able to describe this little picnic area and make sense. At a certain point, the trail guides you to an adorable picnic area. There are parking spaces and picnic tables equipped with grills scattered throughout the lakeside area. Families are grilling here constantly. It's lovely. Behind a certain table, often one of the more secluded areas, there is a great little dirt trail leading to a lovely cliff overlooking the lake. I've hung out here alone since childhood, as we always had and in a rather safe area. I promise this will be important later. Still with me? I hope that was all clear. I'm so spooked right now. I was finishing up what would be my last run before my tendinitis flare-up, thus forcing me to rest. It was dusk and I was just about to cross through the adorable park and onward through the trail towards home. When I hit the park, I stopped, thinking I might head towards my beloved hidden trail to take a brief rest on my favorite cliff. I am not one to be paranoid and I am quite adventurous, but after hours on Let's Not Meet, I decided, maybe not, and picked up my speed. I noticed a van parked, but there usually were people here. Didn't think much of it. Maybe a fisherman, and I moved along. So thankful for that. The next day, I had such brutal pain from overdoing my workouts that I could hardly walk, let alone run. I know, way too overzealous. I took some time off. This morning I wake up to a news update from my news app, stating that police are investigating a dismembered, burnt female's body found in the lake a few hours before I had woken up. I opened the article only to find worse news, where the body was found, burned and gruesomely chopped up, was just on my favorite trail, right between the picnic table and my beloved cliff, less than 1 mile away from my house, the area I run through 4 times a week, the same area where I almost explored just a night or so ago, as I'd done since I was in elementary school, the same area that my Reddit paranoia had warned me from that evening, with that same sketchy gray van I thought nothing of. They are still investigating and nobody has been caught yet. I'm less than a mile away here sitting in my dark house, praying that whoever did this gets caught, and that they get caught fast. All I can say is how thankful I am to be safe, and I'm also so grateful for not being the poor soul to discover the body, because that could have happened to me quite easily. That is how much time I spent up there, and that is how close it is to me. I still do not have any clue if the van was involved, but it seems odd, especially since I have a couple of friends, female who used to run the same area, but stopped after weeks of seeing a great van conveniently driving by each time they ran. I don't think I need to explain why we shouldn't meet, whoever you are, but congrats on making me terrified of my own backyard. I'm scared to look out of a window for too long even. If I need to post the article in the comments or get it verified, I will. Just seeing if this gets any listeners or readers, and thanks for reading. I'll keep you updated if the killer is caught. So I was reading a post and it triggered a memory that I had completely forgotten about and decided to share on here. Quick backstory. I used to live in a very small town that was predominantly safe for kids, only had some drug issues. Anyways, my house was located in a small and upscale part of the town, which mainly housed families. There was a small pond with lots of green in the neighborhood that was about a 5-minute walk from my house. To get to the pond, you have to go down a grassy hill. Neighborhood kids, including myself, would always go down to the pond for hours to catch frogs, skip rocks, etc. Okay, so now to the story. On this particular day, it was raining and pretty cold, so there were no other kids at the pond. My best friend, her brother, who was 1 year older than us, and I decided to head down to the pond for a bit. After about half an hour, we see at the top of the hill a minivan pull up. We thought nothing of it, as there was a neighborhood mailbox at the top of this hill as well, and a lot of people stopped to get their mail. A man started to get out of the minivan, and I remember him being older, probably in his 60s. Another note, since we lived in a small town, everybody knew everyone, or at least could recognize everyone. I remember thinking it was strange that I'd never seen this man before in town or in the neighborhood. He got out and just stared at the 3 of us for what seemed to be forever. All of a sudden, he yelled at us and said, "It's not safe down there. You kids better come up here." My best friend and her brother looked terrified, and I had this gut feeling that something wasn't right. We didn't say anything back, and he continued to repeat that phrase. "It's not safe down there. You kids better come up here." And he kept saying it over and over. Our fight or flight reaction kicked in, and we all booked it up the other side of the hill, which was only about a few meters away from him in the minivan. As soon as he saw us running, he got into his van and started slowly driving behind us, literally following us until we reached my house. Luckily, my garage door was open and my parents' 2 cars were parked inside. We hid behind one of my parents' cars and watched as he pulled to the side of my house and parked. My parents were inside, but obviously had no idea what was happening at this point. He stayed parked in front of my house for a couple of minutes, until my dad came outside to take the trash out and saw the 3 of us hiding. I guess the man saw my dad and drove away, but as soon as he left, we told my parents everything. Even until this day, 12 years later, my parents still think we were being overdramatic and that it was a man that was genuinely concerned for our safety because of the weather. Nonetheless, we weren't allowed to go back to the pond anymore. I don't blame them for thinking this though, because the 3 of us tended to work things up a bit and be dramatic. But I knew from the way I had that strange feeling when I first saw him at the top of the hill that something was wrong, and to this day, I still believe that he was planning something sinister. This story goes back to a few years ago when I was a 17-year-old high school student. Every day, I'd walk the 25 or 30-minute journey to and from school. There was a shortcut I could take home that took some time off of the walk, and as a nature lover, the shortcut was very enjoyable. Whenever I'd walk home alone, I would take this shortcut to enjoy the small amount of forest that we have in the medium-sized, moderately busy city. My shortcut was pretty well traveled, and I would occasionally see other people walking from their neighborhood towards my busy street, or the other streets close by, or other students walking home from my high school or the college. Sometimes there would be nobody out there but me on the path. To give you an idea, the path definitely was not groomed, but it was traveled enough that you could make out a path from being trampled over the years. The shortcut started off from the busy road by my high school and went to a low-lying open wooded area with some small ponds. After a few minutes of this, I could veer right up the big hill towards the street parallel to my street. One day I was walking home from school after staying a bit late for extra help. A few minutes into my shortcut, I noticed a guy standing off the main path a bit, seemingly minding his own business and talking on a cell phone. There was an open backpack sitting on the ground by his feet. Growing up with overprotective parents and in martial arts, I've always been a very cautious person and taken a lot of details, especially being a young girl out walking alone. This wasn't unusual by any means, since the entire low-lying area is traveled and there are numerous paths off the main path leading in different directions since it isn't a thick forest, sort of like a free-for-all for walking. Sometimes people would stand off the busy road while waiting for the bus at the stop close by, not wanting to stand in all the traffic fumes while people sped by during rush hour. The only thing I took caution of was that I had been seeing him there a few times that week and had never seen him before. But oh well, maybe he was a college student or just moved to the area. This time walking on the shortcut felt different though, possibly because there was no one else on the path today. But I started to get this bad feeling in my stomach, the one everyone has a hard time describing but most people know too well. Something was not right. I was already well along my shortcut though, and I decided to blame my feelings on me being paranoid, which is not uncommon for me. I kept an eye on him, on my peripheral vision walking by, and he continued to talk on his cell phone and he didn't seem suspicious. So I continued my merry way. I must have walked 20 or 25 meters away when the guy stopped talking on the phone, and I felt an even bigger feeling of dread up in my gut. I turned around to see him crouched over, phone gone, fiddling around with some sort of cloth and a brown glass bottle. Before I had a second to register what the heck he was doing, his head shoots up in my direction and the look in his eyes is a terrifying mix between, I've been caught and I'm not stopping now. He drops everything, leaving his stuff behind, and starts sprinting straight to me, cloth in hand. At this point, I'm too far away from the busy road for anybody to see me in the low-lying woodland with this crazy fuck, and I'm too far away to scream bloody murder. My first instinct in that split-second decision is to run towards my neighborhood. I decided this all as I turned around, throwing my heavy backpack on the ground and sprinting as fast as I could, starting up the hill towards my neighborhood. Judging by appearance, this guy looked like he could break me in two with no effort, and I trusted my flight response more than my fight response. Plus, I didn't know what the heck he had in his hand. All throughout school, I had been the top cross-country and track runner in the entire school, out of the female and male teams. My running had been my savior on a few other let's not meet worthy occasions, but soon into the chase, I knew it wouldn't be enough this time. This guy was very fast, and I could tell he was slowly gaining on me without even looking back. I finally see some fenced-in backyards up ahead, and hoping people are home from work, I start trying to scream help, as much as I could with my out-of-breath, useless voice. I make a split-second decision to start jumping fences of people's yards, hoping this guy's hurling skills are shittier than his running. The first fence throws him off, but by the second into the next yard, he's on my ass and I can feel him come insanely close to grabbing my leg. I'm crapping my pants at this point. I see no cars in driveways, no sign of anybody home, and the only thing that is keeping me from panicking and wiping out in my exhausted state is thinking that I may not ever see my family or friends again. The next yard belongs to people I know rather well, including their dog. Necessary background interruption here. This house was close to my street on the street parallel to mine, and I have come to know their dog very well since they recently moved in. My friend hated the shortcut, and sometimes I would walk to school with her, on the street down the hill to the busy street. This dog was huge and an absolute maniac, and usually when kids were walking to school, they would put him in the backyard instead of the front yard, since he would growl and scare the heck out of the kids walking by while he was tied outside. I love animals, so every time we would walk by, I'd talk calmly to him through his menacing "I'll screw you up" barks. Every time he'd be slightly less vicious to me, until one day the nice people who lived there gave me a treat to give him, and after that, the dog was a nice stop on the way to school. The dog's name is Leo. With that next yard and my newly acquired friend in sight, I had never felt hope like I did in that moment. By some insane stroke of luck, they let him out in the backyard for the afternoon while they were at work. When Leo saw me frantically running towards him, he started wagging his tail. Then looked to the guy chasing close behind me, and he started growling. I thought this would be enough to get the guy to screw off, but no. He started to jump over the fence the second after I did, but the dog jumped up and his teeth came so close to his face that the creep fell backwards into the other yard straight on his ass as I fell into the dog's yard in my blood. The creep and I stared at each other out of breath for a few seconds, while the dog was barking and jumping like mad at the fence at him. Maybe he was assessing if he could take on Leo or not. I prayed the creep didn't have a knife or something. The guy looked angrier than I've ever seen a person, and after a few seconds, got up and started running back down the hill from where we came. I sat there for a few seconds in complete shock and couldn't move until my hero started licking my face. I snapped out of it and ran to the back door and started pounding. They obviously weren't home, or else they probably would have heard what just went down. My house was closed, so I jumped the fence and ran the rest of the way home and called the cops to investigate and try to find the guy. I gave them the best description I could after coming practically face to face with him. The dude's bag was gone and so was every trace of him. They found my poor backpack in a muddy puddle and the police told me they'd keep looking. Never saw the guy again and I didn't hear anything more about it, and after calling the office a few times I gave up. They told me during that time they had received sketchy reports, people being stalked and chased, etc., but nothing like mine over the last few months. And there were a few missing persons cases. But in a city like the one I'm from, not the worst but not the best, you can never connect anything like that for sure. The more I thought about it over the years, the more screwed up it was and the more confused I was. First, if he was trying to kidnap me, why didn't he think of a better way to grab and snatch me into the forest before I had the chance to get away, or before another trail goer possibly walked by? He didn't appear to have a weapon on him or anything except that creepy cloth. And what the heck did he have in his hand? My friend thought it may have been chloroform, but I did research on it, and apparently it's more of the myth that pouring it on a rag and covering a person's face causes them to faint very quickly. Plus, where the heck would you get it anyway? So thanks to that jerk, I never walk the shortcut anymore, without at least 2 friends, and pepper spray or some sort of protection. So, sex trade kidnapper, amateur stalker, serial killer, or whatever the heck you are, please let's not meet ever again. And Leo got lots of extra love whenever I saw him. I, 25 female, have been living in Japan for a few years now, and one thing I have quite often are stalker encounters. It seems that in my area, or anywhere that isn't a big city, now that I think about it, Japanese men can come to be quite obsessed with foreign women, especially fair-skinned, blonde-haired, blue-eyed foreign women, such as myself. I've dealt with quite a few situations where I was sure I would be kidnapped. One such encounter was back in 2013 when I was in my 3rd year of university. The following was a very brief encounter, but a terrifying one nonetheless. I was studying abroad at a school in Saitama, making a lot of friends and having the time of my life. I joined the a cappella club and had a group that I sang with. Together, there were 5 of us. They were all men, which made me uncomfortable at first, but we blended well together and they felt more comfortable singing English songs with me, there to help with pronunciation and whatnot. One day after practice was finished, my group invited me to go shopping with them at a local supermarket to get things for a nabe party. For those of you who don't know, nabe, pronounced nabe, is basically a hot pot. You get a bunch of veggies and some meat, and then you put a big pot on a little portable gas burner and everybody gathers around and eats together. It's a huge part of Japanese culture and a great way to hang out with friends. I was ecstatic that they invited me. I was usually left out of these kinds of things at first because I was an outsider, whereas they had known each other since their freshman year. Over the few months that we had been singing together though, they'd grown to be like a family to me, each one like an overprotective big brother, especially a guy named Osuke. He was tall and a bit on the heavy side, but he was extremely charismatic. Whenever he saw me fumbling around, nervous or confused, he'd quickly appear by my side and throw a heavy arm around my shoulder, practically knocking me over while asking, "What's the problem?" Anyway, the nabe party. We all went to our friend's house for the party and ended up drinking and talking until pretty late. When my phone in my pocket vibrated to tell me I had a low battery, I finally saw the time and realized it was already 4 a.m. The guys were getting ready to nap until the train started back up, but I was only a 30-minute walk away from my share house. I announced that I was leaving and started packing my stuff up. Kasuke offered to walk me home, but I told him I was fine. The sun would be rising soon. Japan has an early sunrise and it wasn't really that far. The cold would kill me before the walk did, I joked. They reluctantly agreed and saw me off, demanding I call them if anything happened. I made it to the station safely, marking the halfway point home. I descended the stairs to see a single car parked outside with a man leaning up against it, staring straight at me. It wasn't anybody I knew. He was older than me and in his mid-30s, maybe early 40s. His head turned, watching me as I walked down the stairs. Feeling uncomfortable with the unwanted attention, I rushed my pace a little bit, rubbing my hands together to fight the sudden chill that overcame me, though I was pretty sure it had nothing to do with the cold. I crossed to the other side of the street, avoiding him as best as I could. I avoided looking at him as well, but I heard the car door slam and the engine start up. Headlights illuminated me, and he turned to drive alongside where I was walking. His window rolled down. "Hey," he said in Japanese. "Are you alone?" I said nothing. "Where are you going? Do you speak Japanese?" I quickened my pace. "You're pretty. Let's hang out." I began power walking. The sluggish tiredness from the party was quickly being replaced with adrenaline. He pulled ahead and I thought he gave up, but his car stopped not far ahead of me, and he put it in park getting out. "Let's go home together." He was standing about 10 ahead of me. I stopped so I wasn't walking closer to him. "Let's go home together," he repeated a little bit more forcefully, stepping towards me. "Get in my car." I didn't have much time to think. I immediately turned left and sprinted into the park. There were only 4 entrances, all of which a car could not enter. It was a traditional Japanese-style garden with tall bamboo trees and a pond of koi surrounding a gazebo in the middle. The man was in a no-parking zone, so he wouldn't leave his car alone. I heard him curse under his breath and jump back into the car. I pulled out my phone, immediately calling Kosuke. Just my luck, though. He didn't answer. I tried the rest of the group. No one answered. I looked to the next exit just in time to see his car crawl by slowly, his head sticking out the window, searching for me as I hid behind a grove of bamboo. Trembling in fear, I tried again and again with no success to reach the guys. I looked repeatedly at my 4 exits, always seeing him crawl by. He was circling the park, waiting for me to walk out so he could talk to me again. Though I had a bad feeling talking wasn't really what he wanted to do. Just as I was about to cry, my phone lit up dimly with a phone call from Kosuke. "What's the problem?" he said jokingly. The other guys in the background were still joking around. In the rush of breath, I explained to him my current predicament. Though he didn't say a word the entire time, I could practically hear the smile leave his face. The rest of the group had quieted too, and I heard one say, "What's going on? Is she okay?" He told me to stay where I was and that he was on the way, but I was already 20 minutes away, and I wasn't sure that I had 20 minutes before the guy parked his car and came into the park to look for me. I looked behind me again just in time to see him drive by that exit, slowly looking through. That's it. I'm cold, I'm tired, and I'm scared. I want to go home. "I'm going to run after he passes the next exit and turns the corner," I explained. "No," he said, "wait for me. I can run and be there soon." But Kosuke wasn't a runner. I didn't think he could get there any faster than I could. He started to say something more, but my phone suddenly went dark. Dead battery. No turning back now. I waited a few seconds and there he was, right on schedule. He crawled by the exit and stopped. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it, but he looked hard and slowly around. The sun was starting to come up now and he had a better view. It was really now or never. He slowly moved forward. I crept out of my hiding spot and moved towards the exit. I poked my head out and saw him turn the corner. I sprinted towards my house and didn't look back. I was too scared to. I don't know if he saw me and I was too fast to follow or what, but I didn't ever see the guy again. I immediately put my phone on the charger and called the guys back to let them know I was okay, but Kosuke never let me walk home alone in the dark again. So my Let's Not Meet encounter happened 7 years ago. I haven't really spoken about it since it happened, as I kind of just wanted to move on and I was really unnerved by the whole experience. I was 25. I am female and I was working a job as an admin assistant, office worker to tide me over and pay my bills until I eventually figured out what the career of my dream was. I was tired of the job. I'd been there about a year when this happened, and believe me, when the creepy shit went down, I was certainly incensed to get myself on a decent career path and the heck out of that place. So you understand my old workplace building, which will give you a clear picture of how this began. I worked in a somewhat old building with a few floors, and On each floor were numerous office spaces that were rented out by different companies. It was a pretty open-plan building, some parts more dilapidated than others, and it was in serious need of refurbishment to bring it A, up to health and safety standards, and B, cosmetic standards for the general public. How the offices on my floor were set out meant that our small office, which only consisted of 4 to 5 workers on different days, was situated at the front of the building with access through the front and back of the building, but nobody really used the back. Our staff quarters, as we called them, the lunchroom, were situated at the back of the building, and being an older style building meant there was a long hall and lots of space between the office and the staff quarters. Staff quarters were used only for lunch breaks, and as we were such a small office, we all rotated our lunch breaks so that only one person was off for lunch in the lunchroom at a time. Nobody else really used the lunchroom, as they preferred to go out and get lunch from the nearby shops, but as I had a shorter lunch break, it was always me, alone in the lunchroom at the back of this old creepy-ass building by the rear entry point. Other parts of the building were now under refurbishment, so there was a lot of upheaval in certain spaces and areas, but we managed to retain ours as normal for a while, before building work was scheduled to begin on our floor. Bear in mind that the lunchroom was so far back from the main offices that nothing could be heard or seen that way. There were only 2 companies on the ground floor where I was situated. The other one was on the other side of the building and used the front entrance, but we rarely saw them and certainly didn't keep track of their staff members or clients, and there was no need for us to see who was going in and out. Anyways, I digress. I was sitting in the lunchroom one day eating, heater going as it was freezing, minding my own business, when out of the corner of my eye, I saw a shadow quickly sweep past the door from the light underneath it. It wasn't unusual for new clients to be wandering around looking for a specific office they required. As we were on the ground floor, there was often a slew of stupid people wandering the corridors aimlessly looking for the office they required. We did have a code entry system on the front door and a telephone system, so you could press the office you needed to get into and it would call through, and they would let you in so people couldn't just walk in without being let in, if you get me. We also had a code for workers to use to get through the front door. As I said, the back door wasn't much used apart from the odd worker who had a set of keys for it, and it was completely unmonitored. I wasn't too startled even when the lunchroom door opened this particular day, and a smart-looking man put his head round, suited and booted and smelling like expensive cologne. I honestly was more embarrassed to see somebody as attractive peering in, as I was sat there with mayo splatter on my shirt and a mouthful of bread, looking in absolute state. But hey, I didn't usually see anyone back there, and I am a messy eater, I admit. "Can I help you?" I asked him, trying to clean myself up. He laughed and said I looked like the one who needed help, and I immediately laughed back, aware that he was still at the door and not imposing on me in any way. Yet, when I laughed along with him, he seemed to take that as an invitation to come right in and sit opposite me at the table. And to my surprise, he took some food out of his expensive-looking leather bag and started brazenly eating a sandwich. "Hey, I'm the HR manager for such and such company upstairs, and every time I go out to get my lunch, I always wonder who is sitting in here alone, so I thought I'd just have a look," he said, still eating and seemingly very calm and chilled. The weird thing about him was that he seemed so normal. Nothing about this guy made me worried. In fact, it was nice to have some company on my lunch break, as most of the time I just sat scrolling through creepy news articles on my phone. We carried on chatting, mostly about mundane stuff. I asked him about his job in the company upstairs, and he asked me about mine. I asked him about where he usually took his lunch breaks. You know, just normal small talk, but it felt more comfortable than that. This guy was super charming. He made me feel at ease. That part is the most chilling to me. I was totally at ease and unguarded. It became a pretty regular thing for him to join me in the lunchroom, and honestly, I was beginning to get a bit of a crush on this guy. He had a good job, was attractive, and was very charming and normal. I began looking forward to seeing him. Stupid, I know. A little attention from an attractive guy, but hey, I was single and not bad looking. So I figured, why couldn't I have a harmless little crush? He had told me his name was Alan, and honestly, I didn't intend to take it anywhere with him. I was totally happy single at the time, and I was getting some minor flirtations from him, but nothing that confirmed he had a crush on me too, or wanted to take it any further. He moaned about the building work taking place and how the whole upstairs offices were a mess. Their break rooms, etc., had all been gutted, and he was glad to have somewhere to eat his lunch that nobody else knew about from his office. Again, not your average creeper, I know. At this point, I didn't even think the guy was a creeper. Until one day, things took a turn. Alan stormed into the lunchroom one Thursday, and I swear, in his eyes, I saw the look of a caged animal. You know that crazy look. You know that restless and jittery and hyper look. It kind of says somebody isn't thinking straight at all. I immediately had my guard up a bit because I had never seen him like this before. It freaked me out the way he stormed into the room, slammed his bag down on the table, and started ranting about how his boss was a jerk and that he wished he could gut him like a fish. All while pacing around, running his hand through his hair, beads of sweat forming on his brow, and pure rage in his eyes. I'd always thought his eyes were so pretty before. They were a steely blue, but right now they looked darker and more imposing than ever. I tried really hard to pacify him and calm him down. I was repeatedly saying it would be alright and to calm down and let's just eat. And whatever had happened, I'm sure could be sorted out. He slumped down in a chair and I went over to him, kind of standing beside him but obviously over him, and I put my hand on his shoulder to console him. With that, he flew up and pushed me back against the wall. I was stunned and I couldn't speak. His body was pressed against me, and almost through his rage, he was in a trance-like state. After he pushed me back against the wall, he just stood there, his hands holding my wrist down by my side, almost like he was taking some weird comfort from the fact that he had me up against the wall. He buried his face into my neck and I was frozen to the spot, like, what the heck is going on here? I always said I would never be one of those girls in an emergency or dangerous situations to freeze. But honestly, like, I had never been in this type of situation, and I could tell he was really volatile in this precise moment. I really didn't know what he was going to do, so I didn't want to risk pissing him off more and then have him attack me or something. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, his face buried in my neck, still holding my wrist quite forcefully, when all of a sudden, he licked my neck and said, "You smell nice." Yes, he actually licked my neck. Seemingly calmer, that's when I decided, nope, I am not standing here with this person who was clearly unstable, holding me up against a wall in anger, and then suddenly being all soft-spoken again and licking my neck in this weird predatory way. That's what it felt like to me right in that second. I felt so stupid for starting to eat with this guy and not even question why he was coming to our lunchroom. I told him to get off me. I was leaving. At that point, I was prepared to take a beating. It shouldn't have been like that, but I honestly didn't know what his deal was. Was he crazy? Was he just emotional or upset? Was he trying to seduce me? Was he going to hurt me? I don't know. I realized I didn't even know this guy. We spent half an hour to an hour in each other's company, passing the lunch hour, but I didn't really know anything about him as a person. It had been a couple of weeks of lunches together, and I realized how short an amount of time that was to really have any idea about this person. He let go of my wrists, and then in the most sinister tone I'd ever heard, he said, "You always seem like you wanted it from me, you damn whore." Before I could respond, he grabbed his bag and stormed out of the lunchroom, and tears just sprung to my eyes. I cracked the door open to make sure he'd left, and I just sprinted back to the front of the building where my office was and told the guys in there everything that had just happened. They were absolutely fuming. They knew this guy had been hanging around me in the lunchroom, but as I'd always been comfortable with it and thought Alan was okay, nobody ever thought anything of it. They actually thought it was hilarious every day when I came back from lunch all tongue-tied after my encounter with attractive Alan, as they now referred to him. They insisted we march upstairs and put in a complaint as a company, and I knew that even if I didn't agree, they would march up themselves to do it. Eventually, I agreed, after feeling shaky and vulnerable, but I knew I didn't want to have to face Alan after the incident in the lunchroom. I went up regardless, flanked by two guys I worked with, one of whom was my immediate boss. As we began explaining the situation, it was evident that something was wrong. The woman and the man from the upstairs company looked really confused when I explained about their HR manager, Alan, and what he had done. They explained that their HR manager was a female called Jules, and that I must have been mistaken because there was no Alan that worked at the company. We asked every single company in the building, and not one company had an Alan working for them and never had. We eventually came to the conclusion that Alan had been coming in every day for lunch, but with absolutely no idea why or what for. We also didn't know if he had the building code or a set of keys for the back end. We didn't know where he had initially come from. Unnoticed, wandering freely around the building. The locks were changed, the code was changed, and CCTV was installed, as it never had been before. Plus, security checks were put in place at the building after this incident, with everybody entering the building being monitored. I never ever saw Alan again, and I still to this day don't know why he was coming in the building every day, having lunch with me, pretending to be an office worker, and I don't know what happened that day when he flipped. So yeah, this isn't the usual creeper on Let's Not Meet, but Alan, let's never meet again. I'm back with another story from my childhood. I tried to add more details that I can remember since the last one got requests to be more specific. I was about 14 or 15 years old, walking back from one of my friend's house at around 10 p.m. on a school night. Trisha's father was a police dispatcher, and the small, medium town I grew up in didn't have much of a force to speak of. I could run to the station in 2 minutes flat, and the park I frequented was next to it. It was also the same building as the Justice Department. Between Trisha's house and my own was less than a mile. I was halfway there when I could see a car, a Ford of a dark color, slowly roll through an intersection in front of me. I knew it was a Ford because it looked like a normal unmarked police car. It stopped for a good 30 seconds in the middle of said intersection as I walked towards it. When I got to it, I sort of stopped. Not as much scared as I was plain confused. I walked around the back of it. The lights inside were turned off as well, and the dark shape in front of the seat sat very still. I kept my ears perked, listening to the sound of the car's tires inching across the gravel. I didn't want to turn, but I could hear the low purr of the engine behind me, following me ever so slowly. Now I was worried. But Dad didn't teach me to panic, especially for how close I was to the police station. I took a deep breath and broke into a full-on sprint across the road, passing through people's lawns and yards, and through an open lot until I could see the 2-lane road that cut our town in half. Across that road was the station. I didn't even want to look behind me again and see if the man was there, because I heard his car. No lights flooded the ground or the space around me. He still had them turned off. I kept running into the street. It was so late and there were no cars on the road. I pushed open the gate separating the park and the outside, flying through it. Breathing hurt. It was winter in the northeast, and the cold was biting. When I reached the glass door of the city hall/police station, my heart fluttered. I was safe. It would be okay. I had to ring the bell to get the police to open the double-locked doors. As I did that, I heard a car pull in behind me into the parking lot. It was that same car, and who should step out of it but Trisha's dad, in his police dispatcher's uniform. Honey, why'd you run away from me? I was trying to get your attention. You left your cell phone out. He held it out, walking towards me, proving his good intentions. His smile was wide and it was supposed to be reassuring, but it chilled me. Nobody came to the door. I was alone with him still. When he got to me, I grabbed the cell phone and stuffed it into my back pocket. I remember the next thing that happened like it was yesterday. He had coffee on his breath and he smelled like cigarettes. Suddenly, he grabbed my arm and pinned me to the door behind him. Didn't your, insert racial slur here, daddy tell you to say thank you, pretty girl? I was shocked. Not once have he ever spoken to me like that. They were from Kansas, but he'd never given any indication that he thought like this. Didn't you hear me, girl? He was inches from my face. His grin now a creepy, sadistic sneer. He used his thumb that pinned my arm to touch the side of my breast. The way he said girl still sends a cold shiver down my spine. I've been assaulted before, but Trisha's dad's way of saying girl still haunts me today. I'll hear it in my mind and want to shrink into nothingness, scream at it until it goes away and cry. And just as suddenly he let go and laughed. I didn't know until a police officer knocked on the glass door behind me. He was staring at Trisha's dad. Problem, miss? No problem, officer. she just forgot her cell phone. Trisha's dad answered for me, his normal smile back on his face. He stepped away from me and let go, but I could still feel his hands on my arm. I don't remember what I did. Nod? Whimper? But I blinked on whatever happened until I got home and cried. Never even told my twin sister, Lexi, what went down. Ever since then, he looked at me in the creepiest way. He would do that sneer at me as soon as I walked into the door to their house. I'll never forget how awful that night made me feel. I didn't walk home alone again. Without a knife, I took from my dad's possessions at least. He's always been a creep and has caused a lot of issues with Trisha's mom and him. They're divorced now since this happened almost 10 years ago. Not only was this the beginning of my problems with him, but it was for Trisha too. She and I still keep in very close contact, and she updates me on her situations with them. Apparently, he attempted to molest her several times with physical repercussions. She's a strong-willed, physically capable woman and handled herself well. She got the heck out of Dodge as soon as she turned 18. Thankfully, she's an adult now, far away from him, and hasn't seen him in several years. I hope she never does. Hello. First off, I'm very new to posting here, so please let me know if I need to correct anything. This just happened yesterday evening in a small mountain town about 40 minutes outside of the major city that my boyfriend and I live in. We had decided to reserve a jacuzzi at a hot springs resort, just to take some time to relax and enjoy getting out of the city for a few hours. We left the apartment around 6:30, to allow for traffic and make sure we made it to the resort by 8. We had a nice drive up, making conversation and flicking through songs. We arrived about half an hour ahead of schedule, so we decided to sit in the car and wait to check in. When we arrived, I was immediately met with a sense of unease. I didn't tell my boyfriend, but made a mental note of the feeling. I've learned not to brush those feelings off, so I made sure I was a bit more alert during our little trip. We checked in and got all set up in our jacuzzi. The way it was set up was very private, so there was fencing all around us and a door with a lock on it to get into the area. When I first walked in, I was overcome with the feeling that I had to get that door locked as soon as I could. I'm usually a safe person and would have done this anyway, but the feeling of the locked door being a necessity at that moment was rather uncanny. As the night progresses, the sky begins to darken, and my boyfriend and I are remarking on how beautiful the mountains and sky are at this time of the evening. We are making jokes about some crazy mountain man running out of the hills towards us, and I start cracking up. I'm mid-laugh when we hear someone jiggle the door to our jacuzzi area. I stop laughing, and I am immediately struck with a fight-or-flight sense of fear. Now, I've been startled before, but this was just different. I felt legitimately threatened by the energy that whoever was outside of that door was giving off. As the jiggling continued, my boyfriend called out, "Yo, you need something?" The person on the other side began to yank forcefully on the door now, and my boyfriend yelled out, "Hey." I've heard my boyfriend's voice when he gets upset or angry at someone, but this was different. This was the "you really don't want to mess with me" protective type of voice. The jiggling continued for a moment longer and then ceased completely. During this time, I had been about 15 feet away from my clothes, which contained my knife, and was 100% ready to dive for them if the person had broken through the locked door. Since we were only a few minutes away from our time being up anyway, we decided to get dressed as quickly as possible and just book it back to the car. The whole time we were getting ready, up until we drove out of the lot, I could feel somebody watching us. About 100 yards or so away from the resort, there was a park of mobile homes. From our tub, you could easily see these mobile homes if you stood up on the edge of the jacuzzi. That means that whoever was home and looking out their window could see you too. During the whole time we were there, I was the only one who stood up completely, so I'm the only one that anyone in the mobile homes would have seen, making it seem like I was all alone there potentially. Later in the evening, my boyfriend and I were rehashing exactly what had happened and trying to figure out who the heck had tried to get into our jacuzzi. We figured if it had been resort staff, they would have made their presence known and asked to come inside. If it had been another customer and they tried the wrong door, we assumed they would have said something like, "Oh, sorry, wrong door." My boyfriend looked at me and said, "You know, you were the only one who stood up in the hot tub. And with the way it's positioned, somebody in that trailer could have easily been staring right at you. This honestly made my blood run cold for a moment because I knew he was right and I knew in my gut that's probably what happened. I'm a pretty small girl, about 5'5", and I look barely 18, even though I'm actually almost 23 and I weigh about 100 pounds. Overpowering me would be like taking candy from a baby. This realization, coupled with the fact that we both felt so disturbed and uneasy about the whole thing, made me realize whoever was trying to get in there did not have any good intentions. I have thought about sharing this story on Reddit before. The time and place never seemed right until I found this subreddit. I rarely ever think of this. I think I mostly blocked it out. I am female, and when I was 25, I was in a transition period of my life. I was divorcing my husband and moving back to my home state to figure stuff out. My aunt had a small 1,500 square foot, 1950s house in a quiet neighborhood. A doors that stick, squeaky wood floors type of place. She had moved out but couldn't commit to the sale. She was happy to let me live there for a bit. I lived in the house for about 5 months. This house was a single-story home, but it was on a hill, so if you went around the back of the house outside, you could walk through a door in a small basement of sorts that you could stand in. If you were in this small basement and continued to walk toward the front of the house, you would quickly be crouching and then crawling. It was a small concrete storage area, and it was under what was my bedroom. One thing I remember about this place was that it was creaky and not well insulated. The floors were creaky, and when you were down in the basement area, you could sort of see light coming through the cracks in the bedroom floorboards. I maybe went down there once, got creeped out, and left. It was around the back of the house, like I said, and I had no reason to even be back there. Being 25 and recently leaving my jerk husband, I will admit I had a few male suitors visit me in that house, in that creaky, uninsulated bedroom. So I get my dream job, and I am moving out of the house. I'm also moving out of the state. My aunt has one request of me, to turn the water off at the street before I leave. So right before I leave the house, I turn the water off at the street. I come back inside and turn on the tub faucet. No water. I have done my job. However, this is where fate steps in. I left the faucet turned on. Didn't think to turn it back off. I drive away to my new life. A few days later, my aunt calls. She's upset because the water company has called her to say there is an unusually high amount of water running at her home. I promised her that I turned the water off and told her about checking the tub, so I'm out of state. She's out of state. My mom gets recruited to go over and figure out what's going on. Well, come to find out, the neighbor's husband from next door had been kicked out. He was living in the little room under my bedroom. He had strung an electric cord over the fence from his house. He had clothes and a toothbrush. Guess he was bathing in our yard. And when I turned off the water, he went right back out to the street and turned it back on. He had been living right under my bedroom floorboards. I am tense just writing and remembering this. I never ever want to meet this guy. The thought of him right under my feet, listening to me in my bedroom, still gives me chills. March 14th, 2008. I was 7 years old, a junior in high school. I lived in a square-mile suburban town in Nassau County, which is one of the richest counties in America. Life there was very quiet. Not much goes on. I had been struggling with depression and couldn't focus on my schoolwork. I had a paper and a whole bunch of homework I hadn't done the night before, so I woke up at 7 a.m. and made my way downstairs to my mom's room to ask if I could sleep in, catch up on some schoolwork, and go to school late, and she said okay. I woke up around 10 a.m., later than I had anticipated. I walked downstairs, poured myself a bowl of cereal, and said good morning to my poodle. That's when I heard knocking on the door. At first it was regular, calm knocking. I didn't think much of it, but didn't want to answer the door in my pajamas. I picked up the house phone and dialed my mom's phone number. She was at work, as a church secretary. Hey, Mom, are you expecting anybody at the house? Because somebody is knocking on the door. No. Could it be the cable guy? No? Okay, I won't answer it. After I hung up the phone, the knocking continued. It increased and started becoming more rapid and frantic. I peeked through the curtain and saw a bluish pickup truck outside my property. and a man standing at the door. He had a red hat on, a denim jacket, jeans and sneakers. No logos or uniform. I didn't get a good read on his face either. He kept knocking. At this point it was riling up my dog and he was barking on the top of the knocking. I swear, the knocking seemed to go on forever. I checked the locks on the doors to make sure they were secure. Then suddenly it stopped. Quiet. And I hear a creak, the sound of the side gate to my house. My pulse raced. Maybe it's the meter reader. I stood in a panic in the living room. The next thing I heard was shuffling coming from the bathroom. Could it be my cat playing with the shower curtain? I had to check. I walked down the hall and peered around the corner to see inside my bathroom. I'll never forget what I saw. The window in the shower was wide open. In the middle of my bright and sterile bathroom was a dark mess pouring in through the window, one leg at a time. Ah shit. Do I run outside the front door? What if there are more men outside that chase me down? Side door? Too close to the bathroom. So I bolted up the stairs as carefully and silently as I could. I heard my dog barking incessantly, not in a panic, but excitement. Happiness. I closed my bedroom door behind me as quietly as possible. I didn't shut it all the way so as to not make any noise. Cell phone. I picked it up and wondered who would come quicker, 911 or my mom, who was at work less than a mile away. I dialed her number. In a whisper. Mom, there's somebody in the house. The creak of his footsteps on the stairs. Shit, I had to think fast. I ducked underneath my desk. I could hear one step at a time as he slowly ascended the stairs. It was kind of like a movie. I quickly dialed 911. That's when my bedroom door slowly opened. His head peered around it to scan the room. That was it. He saw me. I dropped the phone before I could hit call and instinctively put my hands over my head as he rushed at me with a crowbar flying through the morning air. Please don't hurt me, I said. Don't scream, don't say anything. With a gloved hand, he struck me in the face, sending my glasses flying. Now I'm blind. Fell to the ground and squatted with my hands over my head. He took my cell phone. I was shaking and my mind was racing. I'm going to die, I thought. He dangled the crowbar over my neck. I could feel the iron tip graze the skin. He was standing over me. How much will this hurt? How long will it take? What will it feel like having a crowbar in my skull? My mom is on the way home. Not her too. This is it. I'm screwed. He rummaged through my things on my desk. Then there was silence. Is he still in the room? How many people are inside my house? I don't want to know. I heard the house getting trashed downstairs, and I could hear my dog jumping and barking at the invader or invaders, and I could hear them hushing him in a baby voice. Quiet again, for what felt like hours. I heard my name, and I was stunned and confused. Heard it again. My mom. I ran down the stairs. The front door was wide open. There she was in my living room. Bursted into tears and told her everything. I was still in a panic. Was he still in the house? Was he hiding? Called 911. They came and investigated. A pillowcase to stuff the items in. My iPod, speakers, a brand new camcorder, laptop, and leather jacket. For disguise. Were the items missing? I spoke with a forensic artist. The cops drove me around the neighborhood to take a look at suspects they stopped on the street, but he was never caught. After everything was settled, I needed a shower. I cried when I had to scrub the tub of muddy footprints. My post-traumatic stress terrorized my life. I had to sleep in my mom's room. I kept a knife under my pillow. Everywhere I went, thought I saw the man who robbed me, not only of my personal belongings, but also of my overall sense of safety. It didn't help when at school the principal made an announcement about the break-in on the loudspeaker. He told the entire building that I let my attacker in and referred to him as a gentleman. This twisted the story completely. So much so that a rumor went around school that my attacker assaulted me and that I liked it. A whole lot has happened since then, and now I'm much happier, but I still feel the effects of PTSD today. The scary thing here is that he was a landscaper. My family never had enough money for landscaping, but both of our neighbors did. Landscapers are given access to people's yards, sometimes when they're not home, and have plenty of time to scope out unlocked windows, access points, etc. You probably didn't expect anyone to be home because I didn't answer the door. The moral of the story is to always answer the door. Or if you don't feel safe answering the door, Make a noise to signify that you're home, and of course, call the police first. I was looking for a story that I posted a while back, but I think I deleted it on accident. By far, this has one of the craziest and scariest moments of my life, and in light of recent events going on in my life, has resurfaced in my mind. I lived a pretty sheltered life as a child. I'm an only child, and as is sometimes the case with only children, I lived an extremely overprotected life. My mom drilled the stranger danger in my head since preschool and would always stress the importance of being safe. Never go into a bathroom by yourself. Never get into a stranger's car. Never drink from an open bottle. Always ask for permission. Always stay within adults' eyesight. I have to admit that half of the time it went in one ear and out the other. As a preteen, I thought I knew it all and hated the constant nagging. However, I get where she was coming from now. My mom was a recent widow and was adjusting to the role of mom and dad, trying to shield me from the horrors that I am only now beginning to see. We lived in an area that used to be a quaint little dairy town, but over the years had gone downhill and became crime-ridden. The dairy farm fell out of business, and in its place, they constructed homes. It wasn't a bad place to live, but it wasn't the best either. I grew up thinking it was a common occurrence to hear helicopters fly by, announcing that they were looking for somebody. The cross street from my house led to a park that was known for gang activity, where almost every weekend somebody would either be found dead or beaten up. But it was okay because we didn't live on that end of the street, I thought. We knew most of the neighbors, and if we didn't know them by name, we at least knew what they looked like. Despite it not being the best neighborhood, it was pretty quiet overall, and we felt safe enough. By the time I was in 7th grade, I finally had gotten some freedoms. My best friend Tiffany and I would take turns spending the night at each other's houses, but most of the time she would come to mine. Tiffany had a little brother that would always pester us, and she liked coming over to my house because we could talk about boys without her little brother trying to eavesdrop. I think my mom preferred it that way too because she was much more lenient with us, knowing that we are safe at our house. She would even sometimes go on her daily walks and leave us home by ourselves for about an hour or so, and we loved this. I'm not sure what happened or what we did this particular day. Probably ate pizza, sat on my front porch, outside as the sun set, and listened to the radio at way too high of a volume. Perhaps this was even one of those nights my mom left us home alone for a while. I wish I could say I saw something out of the ordinary or felt uneasy, but I didn't. After it got dark, we retreated to my room. My room has 2 windows. One faces the backyard and the other faces the street. I like natural light as much as possible, so as usual, the blinds were open. Even though it was now dark outside, which meant people could see in but we couldn't see out, I still left them open. I was too lazy to climb onto my bed to close them and had a false sense of security, knowing there was a tall pine tree directly in front of my window. With the tree in front of the window, I felt protected, almost as if my mom were invisible to the outside world. As the night grew quieter, we decided to build a fort out of sheets and tell scary stories. By this time, it was really late at night, and my mom was fast asleep in her room. After the first story or two, I started to grow uneasy and got up to close the blinds. I was creeped out, thinking somebody could be lurking outside, peeking in, but figured it was all in my head because of the stories we were telling. We got through a couple more classic stories, like the Hook Killer and stuff. Started talking about true ghost stories, things that relatives claimed they saw or heard. Our eyes were watery, hearts pounding, and muscles clenched when suddenly there was loud, furious banging on my bedroom window. It wasn't a knock that grew into a series of louder knocks. It was like an angry one that you felt throughout your body. My heart was pounding in sync with each subsequent knock. I sat there frozen, not knowing what to do. My mind was frantically trying to make sense of the situation. It just didn't make sense that somebody would be knocking on my bedroom window so late at night. We have an iron gate that surrounds our house, and it's pretty loud. I was surprised that we didn't hear the gate open. Even then, the front door is 5 feet from the gate. Why didn't they knock at the door first? My room is all the way in the back and wasn't even the first window with the light on. You pass by 2 other windows before you get to mine. A million questions are running through my head, and My brain comes to the only possible conclusion. It's Tiffany's little brother trying to scare us. Yeah, because it makes sense that a 10-year-old boy walked over to my house in the middle of the night to scare us. In what felt like ages, but was probably only a matter of seconds, I finally came to the realization that it wasn't her little brother. The knocks continued. They were loud and angry, yet nobody was saying anything. We were both frozen in fear. I just wanted to stay hidden in the fort where I couldn't be seen. What if whoever was knocking was peeking in through the cracks in the blinds and watched me as I crawled out from under the sheets? The thought of that made my every muscle weak. Then silence. The knocking had stopped. I felt my body ease up a little bit. Maybe who was ever there had left, and, cue teenage brain, we decided to go investigate. My mom was blissfully unaware of what was going on, still fast asleep. We slid out of the fort and tiptoed down the hallway towards the front door. Adrenaline pumped through our bodies as we decided one of us would sneak to the front door and look out the peephole or window and see if we could see something. Neither one of us wanted to be the one to do it, but it was my house, so I volunteered. All the doors were locked and the windows had bars on them. I just had to be as quiet as possible. Beneath every step, I took the wood creaked and groaned. After a few minutes, I finally found myself standing at the front door. My whole torso felt numb as I inched my face closer to the peephole. Holding my breath, I look out and I suddenly feel hot and cold at the same time. I didn't know whether to keep looking out or slink back down. I think a little part of me had convinced myself that the porch would be empty that night, but instead, standing on my porch was an unfamiliar man. I had no idea who this man is, but he is standing awkwardly close to the door. Something about it just didn't seem right. What threw me off the most was that he was just pounding on my bedroom window 15 or so minutes ago, and now he was standing at the front door so calmly and quiet. It was as if the roaring avalanche had turned into a falling feather. With my stomach in my throat, I snuck back to the hallway where Tiffany was waiting for me. All I could say was, "There's a man out there." "Immediately," she says. "Go tell your mom." It wasn't a question, but a demand. We ran into her room and urgently told her, "Mom, someone's knocking." She must have sensed the urgency in my voice because she sprung up and told us to stay in her room with the door closed, and instructed us not to open the door no matter what happened. We stood behind that door for what seemed like ages, trying to listen. The front door was too far away, so all we heard was silence. Finally, we hear footsteps coming toward us. It was so quiet around us that I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. I about had a heart attack when my mom's bedroom door started swinging open. It was my mom. She told us not to worry about it and that the man was gone. This left me with a million questions, but she was very vague. What did he want? Nothing. Who was he? I don't know. She shooed us back to bed and we complied. The adrenaline had started to wear off and I was now exhausted. We didn't stay up and speculate or talk. That was it, and it was the end of the story. For now, at least. The next day, I was sitting in my room and heard my mom talking to someone. I have always been a very quiet kid. Even as a baby, people would often forget I was around. I'm quiet, but I hear everything. I stopped what I was doing, probably downloading music on Napster or something, and listened. My mom was telling her friends about the man. Apparently, she opened the door and through the screen asked the man if he needed any help. The man stammered as if trying to think up a story and introduced himself as the neighbor. He said that his mom was sick and he was going around asking for money to help buy her medicine. Concerned but also trying to poke holes at his story, my mom asked him what her name was in case my mom knew her. The guy didn't give her an answer, or gave a vague one and then pointed in a general direction, saying they lived at that house over there. My mom didn't buy it. She knew everybody that lived near us and she had never seen this man before. She probably should have just closed the door at this point and told him she didn't have any money on her, but she didn't want to make him mad. She didn't know if he was armed or dangerous and thought, maybe he's just a junkie and will run off if I give him some cash. Luckily, she had fallen asleep in her clothes, so as she reached in her back pocket, she found $5. Change from the pizza we had ordered earlier. She unlocked the screen door and handed him the cash. The man started getting more aggressive and growls. "That's all you got?" Now, my mom is starting to sense something more sinister in the man. He's not just a junkie, or if he is, he's a very aggressive one. My mom then lies to him and quickly tells the man, "Yes, this is all I have. We live day to day here, and $5 is actually even more than I should spare, but your mom is sick and I feel bad. She definitely needs this money more than we do right now." Not satisfied by her answer, he continues to demand more cash. My mom realizes that this man is not taking no for an answer and begins to bluff. She tells him that she'll go get her husband. Maybe he has some cash on him. We really don't have any more cash, but maybe my husband has some on him. I would hate to leave a neighbor in need. Your mom must really need that medicine, Tim. At once, the man's demeanor changes as he mutters, "No, that's okay," and treks out of there. I don't know what would have happened if the man had called her on her bluff, but thinking a man was present scared the heck out of the guy enough to drive him away fast. I grew cold, thinking that he probably thought Tiffany and I were home alone. He must have been watching us and was planning on breaking in. Cue teenage brain. Oh, well, he's gone. Gotta go download that Usher album. Disclaimer. I'm not sure if the following event was related, but due to its close proximity to the previous one, I think it's definitely worth mentioning. The following week, I was waiting for Tiffany's mom to pick me up to go to school. We lived 2 houses away, so they would always swing by for me in the morning. I usually would be done getting ready before they arrived, so I would head outside to the front yard and wait for them out there. Sometimes I would go climb a tree in the front and look for the bird eggs. Other times, I'd just search for 4-leaf clovers. I was walking around not paying attention to my surroundings when I heard what I can only describe as what I would imagine a gun with a silencer sounds like. A quiet little pew, followed by a loud noise, which I later realized was glass breaking. Stunned, I looked around. What the heck was that? All I saw was a white van drive by. I looked over at my neighbor's house and noticed that the window to their car was completely shattered. Shards of glass everywhere. I still didn't quite put 2 and 2 together until I saw the same white van drive by, the driver staring me down. I felt a sense of unease and wanted to run back inside. For some reason, though, I didn't. I had too much pride and didn't want to give them the satisfaction of knowing they scared me. Also, I thought if I ran inside, they would maybe think I was a snitch and would retaliate more. I played dumb as if I didn't notice anything, and they drove by again, and once more after that. Tried to not look at the van as it drove by, but each time it drove by, I could feel the driver's gaze on me. Soon after, Tiffany's mom came by and took me to school. I don't know if the man drove by a 4th time. Never told anyone about the van. Luckily, nothing ever happened after that. This happened to a friend of mine who lived in the same neighborhood as me when we were about 8 or 9 years old. My friend E and her family lived just a few houses down the street from mine. We lived in a neighborhood where almost everyone knew each other. The biggest worry we ever had was that some outsider would come into the neighborhood and cause trouble. Some people left their homes unlocked because we felt that safe. There was an incredibly nice family that lived directly across the street from E's house. A mom, a dad, a 16-year-old son, and their other mentally challenged son who was 22 years old. I'll call him Tim. Tim was always home because he wasn't employed due to his disability, but his parents were working full-time, and his brother had school. All day, every day, he would be outside waving and smiling at anyone who drove or walked by. Big smiles, showing all of his teeth and sometimes giggling, just out of the pure excitement and happiness of interacting with other people since he spent most of his time alone. He was not creepy per se. One day, E was sick and didn't go to school. Even though she was only about 8 or 9 years old, E was allowed to stay home sick by herself. Plus, her mom was going to be home around 2 o'clock anyways, since she only worked part-time, and the neighborhood was safe enough. E locked all of the doors except the one that led into the garage. They used this as their front door because it was easier in those cookie-cutter homes to just open the garage, pull in, get out of the car, close the garage, and walk into their house through the unlocked door that led from the inside of the garage to the inside of their home. This is obviously not the safest way to protect your home from intruders, but we literally all did it, as if a flimsy garage door could keep anyone from getting into it if they wanted. The worst part is that they had an outside cat and kept the garage door cracked just enough for him to get inside for his food or shelter if he needed be. So he's asleep, feeling sick and with a fever. All the doors and windows are locked, except the door leading to the cracked garage door. Tim was bound to know she was home alone since he was outside the front of his house all the time. He wakes up to pounding on the front door. Startled, she walks downstairs and looks through the peephole. It's Tim. She cracks the door and he says something along the lines of how he notices everything and would guard her home since she's home alone. She said thanks, but there was no need to, and to have a good day. It was beautiful weather. He looked pissed. He got angry and said, "You think I can't do it because I'm dumb, but you watch and see because I'm not dumb." She said, "Sorry, and I didn't mean it like this, but I have to rest now." She dozed off and woke up to a noise downstairs in the kitchen, the room the door from the garage led into. She hadn't heard the garage door open, but she was sick, so she figured she was deep in sleep and just hadn't noticed. Completely disoriented from time, she looked over at the alarm clock. It was 10:20, way too early for her mom to be home. At that moment, she heard noises from downstairs again. She didn't call out. She had been sleeping in her parents' room and ran into their bathroom, slamming the door loudly. Then she remembered their bathroom door had no lock on it. The noise she made slamming the door alerted the intruder to where in the house she was at, and big footsteps started coming upstairs. She moved quickly and quietly to her parents' closet, which was on the other side of the big room. She closed the doors and hid behind some clothes, all the time thinking how somebody would have gotten inside. She remembered that the garage door was cracked for the cat, slightly but not close enough for a thin person to slip under. Tim walks into the bedroom. Tim is tall and thin. She can see him through the slatted closet doors. She saw that he was holding a knife and did everything she could to not scream. He quickly went to the master bedroom where she was just moments before. These cookie-cutter houses only had about 3 floor plan layouts, so it wasn't hard for him to find. He looked inside the bathroom and didn't see her, then started making loud throaty noises like somebody would if they were frustrated. While pacing the entire house, she stayed in the closet for hours, even after she heard him exit through the front door. She stayed until her mom got home. She was crying hysterically and told her mom what happened. Had she not been so upset and had one of their kitchen knives not been left by the front door, her mom might have blamed it on being delirious from a high fever, because nobody would expect him to do this. The police were called and an official report filed. I'm not sure if he had any charges pressed against him, because after she told me the story once, she refused to talk about it again. I overheard her parents a few times talking about the situation, with my own parents, but never heard what the consequences were. He was so traumatized she went to therapy afterward for several years, and still wouldn't talk to anyone about it because she didn't want to remember or relive the experience. We even moved into an apartment together years and years later for college purposes. She never talked about Tim. It was like he never existed, and I never asked. I noticed she always locked the front door, which she should, of course. Always locked the door that led to the patio/balcony, even though we were on the 7th level, and always locked her bedroom door, onto which she added an additional lock. And when she locked all of those doors and the windows, she always checked like 3 times. Every single time. I often wonder if there was more to the story than what he told me. We were kids after all, and sometimes kids don't know how to explain things they don't understand. It's terrifying to think about what his intentions were, and if he perhaps did find E, and something else happened. As horrifying as the experience must have been for her, he made a huge statement in the neighborhood for everyone to be more careful. I will always make sure everything is locked, and I don't ever want to meet you again, Tim. This story extends from 8th grade middle school to my freshman year in college. I'm 24 years old now, so this must have begun in 2008. I was raised in a Korean household with strong Christian beliefs. Every summer and winter, there would be a youth retreat where all the teens in our church would go to one big joint retreat with counselors and teenagers from churches in and out of state. I met my best friend, Hannah, there. She was from Philly and had a pastor who was named Alan. After these retreats, everybody would add each other on Facebook and keep in touch. I remember a day or two after the '08 summer retreat, Pastor Allen would often reach out and ask how my walk with God was going since the retreat and if I ever needed someone to speak to. I could always confide in him. This didn't alarm me at the time because counselors would keep in touch all the time. I always kept our conversations brief considering the fact that I was shy and timid. Over the years, I'd always see Pastor Allen at retreats and was friendly with him. Nothing strange happened other than his persistence with keeping in touch with me on Facebook after retreats. I slowly stopped talking to him, and eventually, we didn't speak at all. But this is where it gets weird. One day, after our summer retreat in 2011, I got a friend request from a woman named Sumiko. I noticed we had a lot of mutual friends from the retreat, so I assumed she was a counselor there. She messaged me immediately after I accepted the request. She and I became quickly acquainted. At the time, I was 15, and she was everything I needed in an older sister. Although we never met, I let my naivety get to me and confided in her about my teenage girl troubles. After months in, I remember walking into church and asking one of my youth leaders if they met a Sumiko at the retreat. He said he never heard of her. I asked him if he could check the roster, and he did, only to find out there was no Sumiko on the list. That's when things started to get super eerie for me. I panicked and went home to block Sumi on my Facebook. I saw on her page that the only person who continued to tell her it was nice seeing her was Pastor Allen. Nobody else from the retreat seemed to really be interacting with her. It all started to freak me out. I blocked her and unfriended Pastor Allen. I remember no longer attending these church retreats. A few days later, I received an email telling me that Sumiko was going through a hard time because of me, and that the email is coming from the mental hospital that she was staying at. They told me it was all my fault. I was a junior in high school under high amounts of stress from SATs, and I deleted the email because I just wanted to forget about it all and focus on studying. Shortly after, I started to receive really unfriendly anonymous messages on my Tumblr. They would tell me that I was going to burn in hell for eternity if I continued to stray from God, and they continued all the way into my senior year in high school. I always deleted and ignored them, or I'd reply sarcastically and laugh at them with my friends. Eventually the messages faded and I didn't hear much from them anymore. In 2012, I got accepted to a close-by Christian college, and I moved into my dorm. My dorm floor decided to have a little icebreaker meeting to help us get comfortable. I met another Korean girl and we began talking about our similarities in our childhood, being raised Korean with Christian parents. I opened up to her about my encounter with Pastor Allen, and midway through the story, I saw her face slowly dropping and getting pale. She told me she had a very similar encounter with a pastor she knew, and that he seemed like it might be the same man working with the youth in an all-Korean church. I asked where she was from, and she replied with the same state that Pastor Allen was from. She then asked me if the name of the pastor was Allen. We had the same predator in our lives at the same age. I'm not sure where Allen is now, but I hope that he has not harmed any little Korean girls, or anyone for that matter. It's absolutely disgusting. He was borderline 60 years old when I was 14 to 15. It makes me sick knowing people prey on children in the most vulnerable ways. It ruined a lot of my perspective on Christianity as well. It's horrible to take something so spiritual and take advantage of a child with it. So, Pastor Allen, with a creepy young Asian girl fetish. Let's never meet again. Okay, so this just happened to me, female 28, and I'm sure I will not be able to sleep. My boyfriend is not answering the phone, and I need to get this out. My company organized an event for the clients and the staff at a luxury hotel. Everybody partied, and I got into my room an hour ago. It's 3:27 in the morning here. Like, I don't know, 15 minutes ago, a guy entered my room with a bottle of water. It woke me up. I was super scared. He says that somebody came from my room to order a bottle of sparkling water. Weird explanation. There is a minibar, and there is a corridor in the room before entering where I am in the bed. So basically I am half naked in my bed. He comes closer to me at the level of the table, apologizing for the inconvenience, but he is still there, and I kid you not, he starts talking to me, saying how he is going to be in trouble and stuff, and how someone called and he is so sorry, and the others got in the hotel super drunk, and it must have been a mistake. I swear he'd been standing super close to my bed for 5 minutes, and I was so shocked I was just saying, No, it's okay. I just got scared. Really, no problem. Just go. Well, he says he doesn't see me well and asks my name. Twice, he says. Well, so I guess I wish you a good night then. Then kisses me on the cheek, like we French do, but once again, I'm half naked in my bed, dead scared, and he is in a suit, all dressed. Literally, I don't even know what I could have done. He left after the longest minute saying how he was sorry and how he would appreciate that I don't tell anyone. And now the phone in the room just rang. I don't know if I should still be scared. Was he just confused by the mistake? I'm super scared, though I cannot think right now and my heart is racing. I need to have some rational feedback after this, really. Update 1. I am okay, by the way. 34 hours later. So, this is a story that happened to my mom's friends in Korea like 10 years ago. Every time I hear this story, I still get the chills. My mom's friend lived in an apartment complex in Seoul. She was a stay-at-home mother with a young daughter, and her husband worked during the days. One day, she was coming home from running errands with her daughter and got into the elevator in her building. When she got on, she noticed that there was a man wearing a cap and a yellow raincoat, and he kept his head low so that she couldn't really see his face. She immediately felt really uneasy and made her daughter stand to her side, furthest away from the man. What made her feel even more uncomfortable was that when she pressed the button for her floor, there was no other lit number. And on top of that, she noticed that she was carrying something wrapped inside newspaper close to his side. Things started to click in my mom's friend's head, and she started to panic and decided to take out her cell phone and pretend she was calling home to her husband, who was obviously really not at home and at work. She started saying things like, "Oh, I'm on the elevator and about to get off. Can you get the door for me?" And making it seem like her husband was waiting at home. When the elevator did reach her floor, I think she lived on like the 12th floor or something, she quickly got off and grabbed her daughter and started to walk as fast as she could to her apartment. She noticed that the man also got off on her floor and was slowly following her down the hallway. When my mom's friend got to her door, she started to bang on it and shout, "Hey, I'm home. Please open the door," and kind of pretended like he was coming to answer the door. Upon seeing this, the man in the yellow raincoat started to walk away back towards the elevator. When he seemed to be far away enough, my mom's friend quickly picked up her daughter and slid open the door's passcode thingy. This is usually how people get into their homes in Korea, and started to frantically punch in her key code. But the problem was that the buttons would make sounds, so the man knew that nobody was going to answer the door for her, and he turned around and started to run back towards her. My mom's friend at this point was practically screaming, and when she finally got her door to open, the first thing she did was throw her daughter in through the door. When she got in herself, she saw that the man was pretty much inches from the door, but she managed to shut it and lock it before he could wedge his hand or weapon into the door. Afterwards, looking through the door's peephole, she saw that the man was walking away back towards the elevator. Several months later, my mom's friend was watching the news, and there was coverage of the capture of a serial killer named Yoo Young-chul, who used to kill a lot of prostitutes. She told my mom that she could never forget the dread she felt when she saw the too familiar yellow raincoat and hat that he was wearing when apprehended. This is really messed up. I was in my early 20s when it happened. I was dating this girl named Chelsea who lived in a nearby town. I had to drive for 1 hour to get to her place and spent some days of the week there. We were working at the same company in a bigger city that was roughly in the middle of the way for both of us. Chelsea's town was quiet and had a lot of green around it. Several summer camps existed in the area, and as a kid, she would always spend the summer months there. After years of visiting those places, she ended up making a strong and united group of friends who grew up together. They were all in their early 20s and decided to live near each other. Some of them even worked as counselors in one of their favorite camps. They were so integrated that almost every day at least one of them would show up to have dinner at Chelsea's place or invited us to hang out somewhere in the area. Super nice and friendly people though. Within weeks, I felt as if I was really a part of it. The group had around 6 people, 4 girls including Chelsea and 2 guys, Rick and Tom. These guys were roommates and inseparable. Picture a random white dude wearing flannels, light washed jeans, and dirty Timbs. That was Rick, a super common guy. He had a daughter. Rick must have been about 23 at the time, and the little girl Emma was around 5. Her mom was a girl he met at a party. Her name was Alejandra. They hooked up and she got pregnant on the first and only night they spent together. As her parents were extremely Catholic, they insisted her pregnancy was a gift from God and made her keep it. From the outside, the situation looked super under control and healthy. Alejandra was going to college, and the girl would stay at Rick and Tom's place during the week. It's safe to say those 2 dudes were raising the kid. Rick had part-time jobs around the town and would work as a camp counselor over the summer. I knew him and the girl pretty well. I went to his apartment several times and played with the kid, and they would often visit Chelsea. After a few months, Rick left the town looking for a better job. Everybody was baffled as nobody was expecting him to leave. The girl stayed with her mother and he went to the capital of the state. The routine changed completely. Now Emma would only spend the weekends at her father's place. Her mom would drive her there. Apparently Rick was doing fine. Some months later, Tuesday morning, I was sitting in my cubicle at work when Chelsea sent me a message, which is odd. We have to talk. Meet me downstairs outside. Oh shit, I thought. What have I done? I go downstairs and she's crying uncontrollably and her makeup is all messed up. What happened? I asked. Rick's daughter is dead. He's going to jail. What? Everything after that Tuesday became extremely odd, creepy and nonsense. The crime was just so brutal and gruesome that the whole state became aware of it. Rick is taking a shower on Sunday evening, getting ready to drive his daughter back to her mom's place. The girl is playing alone and he leaves the bathroom to get his clothes. The apartment was a 1-room studio and sees Emma on the floor with a thick canvas bag around her head and lots of blood coming out of it. Desperate, he removes the bag to find his daughter's face completely disfigured and bloody. He places the bag over her head again, calls 911 and waits. That was Rick's first version of the story. He claims somebody broke into his place while he was showering and brutally murdered his little girl. Initially, the cops believed him, and even though there was not a single sign of somebody else on the scene, upon inspection of the surveillance cameras, nobody was seen breaking into his apartment and his windows were still shut. The autopsy of the body showed Rick's skin under the girl's nails and his fingerprints all over her body. Somebody strangled her and then hit her in the head several times on hard surfaces around the apartment. They found a bloody t-shirt that belonged to Rick hidden under the bed. He never pleaded guilty. However, during the trial, he changed his version to, "I don't remember what happened that night. I'm sorry." "Why didn't you remove the bag?" the police asked. "Because it was not a nice thing to see." That was his answer. Alejandra's interview that went live on television was just utterly terrifying. She claimed Rick had always been an unstable man with several mental health issues, and he would constantly bang his head on the wall when feeling distressed. Needless to say, the incident destroyed the group. Nobody could believe Rick was that monster. They paid for a lawyer, and some of them even went to court. They were all exposed by the media, and the town shunned them. Tom couldn't believe his buddy had committed such a monstrosity. He lived with the dude for years and even helped take care of the girl. The last time I heard from him, he was obsessed with the grim details of the case, trying to find evidence to release Rick from jail. Don't you guys think a violent person capable of killing his own daughter would have shown signs of his true nature before? I just never understood that. Why in the world would he do it? My last post got removed, so this is the story re-uploaded. I hope that by sharing my story, anybody going through something similar can spot the red flags sooner than I did and get themselves out of a potentially dangerous situation. I was 17 and in my senior year of high school when this story took place. I took pottery as one of my electives. In that class, I met Beth, who was a junior. We became good friends instantly, and I brought her into my friend group since she was new to my school and hadn't made many friends yet. During my senior year, I was going through a lot. My mom and dad got divorced, and my mom stopped her meds and had uncontrollable mood swings and anger outbursts. She brought in a new man soon after who was an absolute lunatic. I confided in Beth during that time, and she told me I'm always welcome to stay at her house, so I don't have to be around all of that. So almost every weekend I stayed over there. This means I was around her parents from time to time, but mainly her dad since he worked from home in his office, and her mom traveled a lot for work. Beth told me some pretty weird things about her parents. She said they were swingers and would occasionally bring home random couples to hook up with. She said she thought that was gross and couldn't wait to move out. I got weird vibes from her parents almost instantly, but particularly the father, who I will call Joe for the remainder of the story. The first thing I noticed was how strangely he treated Beth. Like this one time, Beth and I were in the kitchen making something to eat, and Joe came and started messing with her, almost like how two siblings play fight with each other. He would get a spatula and playfully smack her with it, and then she would get annoyed and run after him, or he'd poke her 1,000 times just to annoy her, and they would constantly play push each other. I could tell Beth was genuinely annoyed with him and got so frustrated she yelled at him to stop, but he would just laugh it off like a kid. Maybe some won't find that strange, but to me it was just plain weird. Another huge red flag involving her dad was the time Beth heard through the grapevine somebody at school was talking shit behind her back. Her dad was so invested in the drama and wanted to know everything going on. He made a literal kick account, messaging app, and told off the girl who was apparently talking crap, saying horrible things to her. It was known that the girl was assaulted her freshman year of high school, and Beth had told her father about that. When he was writing those messages, he literally told her that she deserved it, which is beyond screwed up. That was such a red flag to me, and I should have stopped going over there, but I was young and stupid. They also treated me like a daughter and did a lot for me, so I felt like I was sort of obligated to keep going there. As more and more time went on, I stayed at their house. The weirder and creepier things got, and now he started shifting over to me. I remember it being May 2016, and Beth and her parents wanted to throw me a graduation party. Or should I say Beth and her dad, because the mom was away on a business trip. They knew I was going through a lot and that this would cheer me up. I was so thankful that they were doing that for me though. The day before the party, I had to go to the dentist and get one of my molars extracted. How fun. Beth's father said he could pick me up and take me to the house after, since I would be staying overnight and having my party the next day. When he came to pick me up, we had a long drive to their house because they lived in the middle of nowhere. During the ride, Joe's son from a previous marriage, called him. After a few minutes into the conversation, Joe said, "I'm not doing too much. Just taking my name to the house and setting up the party for tomorrow. She just went to the dentist, so she got galls in her mouth and can't talk. Just how we like our women, huh, son?" And he let out the creepiest laugh. I just sat there in complete shock after hearing him say that. I mean, WTF? For the remainder of the car ride, I stayed silent. Not that I could have talked anyway, but I just wanted to get out of that car as fast as possible. We get to their house and start setting up for the party. For context, Beth and all their friends that were coming to the party were underage, but Beth's dad went crazy buying a ton of alcohol. I wasn't comfortable drinking because I had never really drank before this occasion, but I just went along with it and figured I didn't have to drink that much if I didn't want to. The next day the party happens and we're all having a good time swimming, listening and dancing to the music, eating and drinking. Joe was practically with us the whole time, handing out drinks to everybody. He was trying to include himself in our conversations and wanted to hang out with us. I thought it was so bizarre, but I tried to look past it and enjoy my time because they really put a lot into the party. Now nighttime rolls around and the majority of my friends start to leave, but a few asked if they could stay the night because they were too messed up to drive home. Beth's house had a big living room and a guest bedroom, and her sister's room was vacant since she recently had moved out. So Joe said they could all find a place to sleep. The people who stayed were basically all guys and people who were friends of our friends that heard about the party and just showed up. Some of them I had just met that day at the party. I was shocked that he let all these dudes stay over. He was so paranoid about Beth having a boyfriend or even going to prom with the guy. Yet he let these underage dudes get drunk and let them stay at the house. Now here's where things take a huge turn and got worse. The same night, I and Beth and the random dudes are all chilling in the living room, watching some movie. Joe decided to come out and sit with us like he's one of the pals. He starts talking up with the guys and out of nowhere he says, "Isn't blank my name is Stunner? I always say, once she's 18, she's mine, and I'm not letting anyone else have her." Once I heard that, I was done. After I went home the next morning, I knew I had to stop going over there, which ultimately meant I couldn't be friends with Beth anymore. I felt horrible, but school was over and it was summer and I graduated. And Beth wasn't allowed to leave the house and hang out with friends since her parents were oddly strict. Yet Joe gave us all alcohol and let the guys stay the night. Makes no sense. So the only time I would be able to hang out with her is if I went back to her house, which I wasn't going to do. I was also moving to live with my grandma in another state. It was the best decision for me at that time. I told Beth and she was devastated. I was like her only friend and she was trapped alone in that house. A month after that last incident, Joe showed up at my house. He had lended my mom something and was coming to pick it up. They were outside talking for over an hour and I was trying to listen from the window. Basically, Beth told her dad I was moving and was trying to persuade my mom that I should live with them and that it would be good for me. He said they have so much room in their house and even had a car I could use. I wouldn't have to pay them anything. My mom, not knowing how creepy Joe is because I never told her, told him she would talk to me about it. I basically told my mom everything that happened with Joe and she was disgusted and told me to not go there. Who knows what would have happened if I stayed with them. Beth was going to be back in school since she was going into her senior year. Her mom was always away for work, which means I would have been alone with Joe, which absolutely terrifies me. This happened 5 years ago. The last time I heard from her was in 2017, after I had basically moved. Her sister texting me asking if I had heard from Beth. I said no, and she basically told me that Beth left home and nobody could reach her. I tried calling and texting but got no responses. They finally found Beth shortly after, and when I asked if everything was okay, she just said some minor things happened, but she's okay now. She didn't go into detail about what was going on, and it makes me wonder what happened for her to have run away from home. I just hope she's okay now and out of that house. Update on my mom. She's in a much better state of mind. She dumped that POS guy and started going back to therapy and is back on her meds. She's living her best life and I'm so proud of her. Update. Guys, I just went down a rabbit hole trying to see if Beth had a Facebook and I have some updates. She was never allowed to have social media when I was friends with her, but I saw she made an account in 2018, which is the one I found. In 2019, she got pregnant and had her baby that same year. I don't see any pictures of who the father is. It's just pictures of her holding the baby or the baby by itself. The last time she posted was early 2020, so over a year ago. It seems like she doesn't use the account anymore because she's gotten many birthday wishes and people writing on her wall, all of which she is unresponsive to. I found her mom's account since she was tagged in a photo and saw that she divorced Joe and has a new husband. I'm not sure if Beth still lives at home, although in the photos it looked like she was in a different house, so I'm hoping she moved out. As for Joe, I also saw the creep on Facebook. He's been pretty inactive too, and the last time he posted was in 2018. I wish Beth and her baby the best, and I really appreciate your guys' concerns and well wishes for her. I know this story is going to sound like BS, but this story actually happened to my cousin and me in the summer of 2018. My cousin and I live pretty close to each other in the suburbs of Detroit. We both love photography and taking long drives listening to music, so that's exactly what we did on this particular day. We drove about an hour north to a small town and found an abandoned barn that was also for sale. At the time, we didn't spot any trespassing signs, so we decided to be adventurous and go check it out. Huge mistake. The barn was in semi-decent condition, although the paint had begun to peel off. Structurally, it was pretty sound though, so I didn't feel uneasy about going in. I'm an avid urban explorer in Detroit and have been in far worse buildings. Once we got inside, we somehow ended up in the basement of this barn. I immediately was getting some bad vibes. There were little girls' clothes, toys, and furniture littered throughout the basement of this barn. I thought it was creepy as hell, and so did my cousin. Before I continue, behind the barn was a pretty decent sized cornfield. This cornfield backed up right to the barn, so we decided to be arty and take a few pictures in the corn stalks. I snapped a few shots of my cousin, and we decided it's time to head back to the car. Walking through the first row of corn on my way back to my cousin's car, I see a vertebrae in the dirt. At this point, I stopped dead in my tracks in disbelief. Like, is this actually what I think it is? Or is this an animal bone of some kind? I start looking around and, man, there were several more. They were too big to be deer. I yell for my cousin, who was almost back to the car, and have her take a look. We both start really examining the ground, and we keep finding more and more bones. Now, for the record, I've taken a cadaver lab in human anatomy in college, so I'm very familiar with the human body. We found a fibula and fully intact femur. That's when I really started to freak the heck out. We decided to call the cops because we knew this was serious. We waited in the car for a good 15 minutes, totally freaking out until the cops arrived. Once the cops came, there were two. We all started looking through the corn and nearby trash pile. The cops, I don't think, believed us, and I distinctly remember them saying they thought it was a deer carcass. That was until I found a full rib cage in the trash pile, and they changed their tune real quick. The cops told us that they would need us to leave, and they were calling a full forensic team out to start collecting evidence. We left totally shaken up. On the way out, I did see a no trespassing sign, and I'm sure the cops did too, but if they did, they didn't care. We gave the police our information, but we never did hear anything from them. I also watched the news pretty closely for the next few weeks and didn't see anything. This was one of the creepiest things I've ever experienced. I do have a photo from the barn I'd be happy to share. Doesn't show any remains though, of course. I've quibbled with the thought of publicly sharing my story for a while now. Recently, I've arrived at a place where I think the benefit of sharing outweighs the risk. People can be so judgmental. So I'm taking a chance and just putting it out there. Maybe it will help someone. Many times I've looked back on the odd events leading up to the scariest night of my life, October 5th, 2015. I like to say that I did everything right, but honestly in hindsight I should have done more. I'm convinced that my son, who's 3.5 years old at the time, actually saved me from harm that night. I could have easily become another statistic in the crime database. Although my stalker did not hurt me physically, it took me months to get past the psychological damage. Here is my story. In May 2012, I temporarily exited the workforce following the birth of my son Chris. He was born with a physical birth defect that would require multiple corrective surgeries during his first year of life. He was also born 2.5 months early, which had complicated things further. NICUs are no fun. Chris's father, Aaron, agreed that I should stay home with our son until he was 1 year old, considering the circumstances. In May 2013, I felt comfortable enough to leave my son with a babysitter, so I went job hunting. I ended up being hired on the spot as a waitress at a small but very popular chain restaurant in my little town. Let's just say that this little diner is widely known for its waffles and leave it at that. I was hired on to work second shift, the newbie shift because it's not as busy. After 2 months, I had worked my way up to first shift. The breakfast shift is the moneymaker. By the summer of 2014, I had long built a clientele of regular customers that enjoyed my service and tipped me well. Enough for me to have a little put back in savings, which came in handy when Aaron and I broke up. It was not an amicable split at first. I ended up moving out of our apartment with Chris and renting a small 2-bedroom trailer in the same town. It was mid-November of 2014 when I first met Ryan, the man who would later stalk me. It was an abnormally slow Saturday morning shift at the diner. 2 men, one late 40s or early 50s, the other maybe early 20s, walked into the diner together and sat down in my section. They were my only customers at the time, so when the older man of the two started making small talk, I had the time. The older man introduced himself to me as Ryan, and the younger man with him was his son. Right away, by his body language and tone, I could tell Ryan was being flirtatious with me. He even cracked a cliche joke saying, "There's no way you work here because you're too pretty and you have all your teeth." Honestly, I wasn't super amused with that kind of humor. I had heard it a million times over by then, and while Ryan was decent in the looks department, I'd even venture to say semi-attractive. I was a little annoyed with being casually hit on by him. I was 25 years old at the time and much closer to his son's age. But nevertheless, I faked merriment because a happy customer equals a better tip. It's just part and parcel to the job. Suffice it to say, my fake laughing and smiling paid off, earning me a $10 tip on a $20 ticket. They were only there for 30 minutes too. Not too bad, I thought to myself. The following weekend, Ryan came back to the diner. This time, and very subsequent time thereafter, he came alone. There was nothing unusual about this interaction compared to the last. I took his order, we chit-chatted when I had time, and I kept his coffee refilled, and that was it. But apparently, he enjoyed his experience because, again, he left me a nice $12 tip on an $8 ticket. Ryan began visiting the diner every weekend from then on, up until the end of December. By then, he had started coming 2 to 3 times per week, and at this point, he really started showing an interest in getting to know me. Now, that's not something unusual per se. I had some other regulars that I actually developed friendships with, some even getting me Christmas gifts and such, so I did tell him things about myself in casual conversation during his visits. Just normal things that normal people talk about, though. One of the things I eventually told him was about the medical miracle that is my son. I even bragged about the fantastic job his doctors did, showing him the before and after photos of his surgeries. Over the past several weeks, Ryan's attitude towards me had changed. He was no longer this annoying, flirty, middle-aged guy, but rather a seemingly caring person. Maybe I was naive, but I genuinely appreciated his kindness, and I did not interpret it as a romantic gesture at all. Ryan continued coming by on my shifts for breakfast 3 times a week. February 2015 is when the first strange event occurred, which was soon followed by a string of more. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I had picked Chris up from the babysitter and was heading home from work. Now, where I lived was on a small uphill dead-end road. As you pulled onto my road from the main highway, you could easily see my trailer on the right side at the top of the hill. It was positioned perpendicular to the road, and the back side of it is visible as you drive up the road. As I eased my way up the hill, something immediately caught my eye. I could clearly tell my back door was open. I put the brakes on immediately and tried to figure out what to do. I never touched or unlocked that door, much less opened it, so I knew something was horribly wrong. A door is not going to unlock and open all by itself. I ended up parking my car off to the side of the road and calling Aaron. At this point, we were on good terms and co-parenting our son very well. Aaron came straight over and checked out my trailer while I remained back in my vehicle with Chris. About 5 minutes after entering, he called me and told me it was all clear. Again, a small trailer. So I made my way up the hill, expecting to have been robbed or something, but nothing was missing. There was no damage to the door, so Aaron basically brushed things off, saying that I must have forgotten to close it, or something like that. But I knew better, and since there was no sign of a B&E, I decided to let it go. 2 days later, on Thursday, I came home from work and the same thing. My back door is wide open. At this point, I know I'm not crazy. I know I have locked that damn door. It didn't have a deadbolt, by the way. It just had a lock on the doorknob that you turn. I had even tested it out that morning before work to make sure it was locked, so I called Aaron again. I stayed parked with Chris on the side of the road while he did a quick pass through my trailer. And again, nothing out of the ordinary except my open back door. A quick inventory showed me that nothing was missing. I was nervous at this point, thinking that somebody had broken in twice, and Aaron disagreed. He attributed the problem to a faulty doorknob lock, which made no sense to me. He then went to Lowe's and purchased a type of heavy-duty swivel lock to install on the door that locked from the inside of my home. He wanted to put my mind at ease, at least. So, while he installed the lock, I combed through the house. I literally spent hours after Aaron left inspecting every nook and cranny of my trailer. The outlets, my shower head, vents, my panty drawer, etc. I thought that maybe some freak had broken in and planted secret cameras since they didn't take anything. I didn't find anything amiss, so I begrudgingly let it go. So 2 days after that, so on Saturday afternoon, I'm off work heading uphill on the road towards my driveway. My son is spending the weekend with his dad, so I have the house to myself that evening. A wave of relief washes over me as I see that my back door is still closed. Now, I don't know why I decided to do this, but something compelled me to actually inspect the door up close. I needed to also make sure it wasn't tampered with. To my horror, I discovered that it had. There were pry marks along the edge of the door jamb. I immediately went inside and unlocked the door so I could open it and inspect further. The edge of the door was bent to hell and back on the inside, where the doorknob met the jamb. That damage wasn't there 2 days ago when Aaron installed the new lock. I deduced that somebody had probably been using the credit card trick or something similar to easily break into that door, since the way it locked was by the knob, and when they figured out that would no longer work, they tried to pry it open, not knowing that a new lock was on the other side of the door. I'm thankful that lock held. At this point, I called the police and made a report. They basically told me there wasn't much they could do in this instance other than document the incident. They told me to call them if anything else happened. Needless to say, that wasn't satisfactory to me, but I didn't know what else to do. I didn't feel comfortable sleeping at home that night, so I ended up making the hour drive to my parents' house and crashing there. Nothing else happened for a little while. By March, I had been able to put February's events behind me and feel secure in my home again. I was working and going about life as usual. At this point, Ryan had begun visiting the diner 5 days a week. Oddly enough, he was there each shift that I worked. It became a running joke with the other waitresses, and in fun they teased me about having a stalker. I would soon find out just how true that actually was, because in April, things got weird. I came home from work one day to find my grass had been mowed. Now, I usually paid a neighbor to do it for me since I don't have a lawnmower. My yard is small, but maintaining it was a requirement of my lease agreement. My neighbor didn't charge much to mow it, and he needed the extra cash, so it was a win-win. I knew I hadn't asked my neighbor to mow recently, so I thought it was strange. I asked him if he went ahead and decided to do it anyway, and he said he hadn't. So then I called my landlord and asked her if she had mowed my grass for some reason. The lease said if it reaches a certain height, then she would mow it and charge me for it. I knew my grass hadn't been high enough to warrant that, but it was the only plausible explanation. Of course she said no. She hadn't mowed my grass. I was stumped. I then assumed that an anonymous neighbor must have mowed my grass out of the goodness of their heart. You know, like a pay it forward kind of thing. I mean, what else was I to think? All throughout April and the beginning of May, my grass was being anonymously mowed once per week. I know it sounds strange hearing that, but at the time I genuinely thought a neighbor was just doing neighborly things and didn't want to be recognized for it. On May 5th, 2015, Aaron and I decided to take Chris to the zoo. When we got back from the zoo late that afternoon, we discovered that my front door was cracked open. Now my front door did have a deadbolt, but I must have forgotten to lock it. How stupid of me. You can imagine how upset I was due to my back door being tampered with multiple times back in February. I just didn't understand why this was happening again. Like all the other times, nothing was taken. My belongings seemed untouched. Yes, I was feeling targeted, but I didn't call the police because I felt like I technically had nothing to report. There was nothing stolen or vandalized, just an open front door, so I let it go again. 2 days later, I would discover the depth of things. May 7th, 2015. It was one of my rare off days. I was at home relaxing when the diner called me. I answered thinking maybe my boss wanted me to come into work. It wasn't my boss, but my coworker Celia. She stated that somebody named Mary called the diner asking to speak to me. Mary had asked for me by name. Since I wasn't at work that day, Mary left her phone number and requested that I call her as soon as possible. I thanked Celia for relaying the message and ended the call perplexed. I didn't know who Mary was, but out of curiosity I gave her a call. Mary ended up being Ryan's estranged wife. I didn't even know he was married. She informed me that Ryan had a nervous breakdown while they were arguing earlier. He started raving like a wild man about how my name is a better girlfriend than she is and a wife. He told her that we were in love and that he had been taking care of me and my Down syndrome son for months. My son doesn't even have Down syndrome, by the way, and he's not mentally impaired in any way. She initially thought that it was all just crazy, fake talk, considering his mental state. He mentioned where I worked, and he said we were going to get married. Also said that I'd asked him to adopt my son. He said that he was going to run away with me in order to get away from her. He even told her he started visiting me after following me home one day. When he said that, Mary knew that something was wrong. Ryan had somewhat of a history with mental issues, and Mary was used to him weaponizing things to hurt her feelings during arguments, even if those things were lies, but she said this time was different. She knew he had started frequenting the diner, and red flags went way up for her when he admitted to following somebody home. So she decided to call the diner to see if anyone by my name worked there. When Celia confirmed this, Mary perceived the possible danger, and she left me her name and number, requesting a call back. My head was absolutely spinning at this point. While things were finally starting to make sense, I was still gobsmacked. At one point in the conversation, Mary mentioned my grass being mowed. Yes, Ryan even flaunted the yard work he did for me in her face. It was all very strange and very surreal. Basically, Ryan had been obsessing over me for months. He became delusional and had created a whole relationship between me and him in his mind. It was all in his head, and obviously he was the one that was breaking into my home when I was gone. The visits. Why he did it. I still haven't pieced that 100% together. He never took anything, and I imagine he was mowing my grass because that was his little way of taking care of me. Anyway, by the end of the call, I decided to go to the police department in person to file a report about Ryan. I thought at the very least that this was harassment and I needed it documented. Maybe I could get a restraining order. Mary offered to provide an official statement to the police as well, and I thanked her. The police department took our statements and the harassment complaint was filed, although I couldn't get a PO based off my statement alone. I had no hard proof. The officer did assure me that he would personally go talk to Ryan. I then went straight to the diner to inform my boss, Chase, of the situation. Now, Chase took this very seriously. Just that morning, a third shift waitress actually brought up to Chase how a man came into the diner very early, around 4 a.m. This man was trying to get her to tell him which days I'd be working that week. She told Chase it made her uncomfortable. So, when I told Chase about Ryan, he went back and looked at the cameras from that morning. Sure enough, the man that was bothering third shift for info about me was Ryan. So, Chase initiated the process through corporate to get a permanent ban on Ryan from the diner. It was approved at a later date. I was scheduled to work the following day, and I was nervous throughout my entire shift. But thankfully, Ryan didn't show up. Nor did he show up the following day or the next day after that. All was quiet at my home as well. The officer showing up at Ryan's house to speak with him must have spooked him enough to stop. Weeks, then months went by. No Ryan in sight. No vandalism at my home. No mysteriously mowed grass. Nothing. My life had gone completely back to normal. But things changed again in October. October 5th, 2015, it was around 8 p.m. My son Chris fell asleep on the couch while watching a movie. I had dozed off as well until I heard a few very light knocks at my front door. I then walked to the kitchen and looked out the only window that faces my driveway. No cars were there except my own, so I figured that light tapping I heard at my door was either just the TV or my half-asleep brain playing tricks on me. I then returned to the couch and started playing a game on my phone. About 5 minutes later, I heard a few light knocks on my door again. This time I was wide awake, so I knew my brain wasn't playing tricks, so I walked back over to my kitchen window to double check the driveway to see who was there. Again, my car was the only one on the driveway. Right as I go to close the kitchen window blinds, loud knocking suddenly erupts at my front door. And I mean loud, like angry banging. I guess my instincts kicked in and I sprinted to the couch. I scooped Chris up into my arms and ran down the hallway to his bedroom. I did the only thing I could think of in that fraction of a moment. He was groggy and confused, but he listened to my instructions. Get under your bed, stay under it, and don't come out until I tell you to. I then ran to my kitchen and grabbed a knife while dialing 911. I actually screamed at the door that I was calling the police in hopes that it would scare them away. I positioned myself at the end of the hallway which connects my son's room to the living room. This way I'd have a clear view of both the front door in front of me and my son's bedroom doorway behind me. As the operator picked up my call, the banging on my front door was getting even louder. 911 said she was dispatching police right away. She instructed me to stay on the line until they arrived. About 12 minutes into the call, the banging got more violent, rattling pictures off the wall. I thought for sure that they would break my door down at any moment. 911 asked me where I was located in the home, and I told her. She asked me if I could hide somewhere, and she told me not to put myself in danger. In that tiny moment, I felt enraged. Hello. No, I'm not going to hide. I'm not taking my eyes off my son's bedroom under any circumstance. Where are the cops? And besides, I live in a small trailer, and the only hiding place for an adult is my bedroom closet. I'd be easily found. So I just erupted over the phone. Look, lady, I'm a single mom. I have no man, no gun, and no place to hide. If he breaks the door down, what am I supposed to do? Throw this knife at him? Where are the cops? She assured me again that the cops were on their way and to stay on the line. More banging, but this time it moved to the actual side of the trailer. It sounded like they were taking a baseball bat and beating it against the outside of the trailer. At that moment, Chris started shrieking. I ran the few steps over into his room to check on him. The loud commotion had just pushed his fear gauge over the edge. He was screaming and crying incessantly under his bed. I quickly ascertained that he was physically okay, and I returned back to the end of the hallway to check on the front door. As I was explaining to the police that my son was okay, just scared, I noticed that the banging had suddenly stopped. I waited for another minute or so, trying to listen out for any sign of further escalation, like window breaking or anything. All I could hear were cries coming from my son's room. All in all, it took the cops 23 minutes to arrive. By then, the perpetrator was long gone. For reference, I live about 10 minutes away from the police station. 911 even called it in as an active home invasion. I was livid about the response time. My front door was made out of some type of metal, just a cheap generic trailer door. It's now covered in dents. There were noticeable scratch marks on the lock. Failed attempt at picking the deadbolt. The siding on the trailer was damaged where the perpetrator had hit it with something. Given the history, I immediately suspected it was Ryan. The police said since I didn't actually see the person, they couldn't arrest him without a witness. The most they could do was make a report. They did end up canvassing the immediate area in case he was on foot, since I didn't see a vehicle in my driveway prior to this happening. However, there was no sign of him or anyone around and about. I deduced that he probably had parked nearby out of sight, that his vehicle wouldn't be spotted or recognized at my home. My home is situated next to a thin patch of woods that have public access roads on the other side. I also am absolutely convinced that Ryan had nefarious plans for me that evening, but when he discovered my son was at home with me, via his terrified shrieking, he bailed. He stopped trying to break into my home the moment my son inadvertently made his presence known. For whatever reason, Ryan always lit up when I talked about my son. He used to initiate conversations about Chris just to watch me dote over him. Looking back, I guess it was his morbid way of bonding with my child, and I think in his own warped way, he grew to care about him. So when he heard Chris scream, he decided not to follow through with whatever his plan was for me. I ended up taking a few days off of work because I was so shaken up. I stayed at my parents' house during that time because I was afraid to go home. My landlord had the damaged door replaced while I was gone. Realizing that I had a job and a life and that I couldn't stay gone forever, I knew that I had to go home. So I got a gun, a small caliber revolver, but it would do the job. And then I went home. I lived in that trailer for another 4 months before I saved up enough money to move. It was totally peaceful during those months, with no further events or altercations. But I just couldn't stand being there anymore. Since then, I have changed jobs, met somebody special, gotten engaged, bought a house, and got a dog. No further sign of Ryan anywhere during any of these life changes. It's been nearly 7 years since any sign of him. Ryan seems to have disappeared out of my life in the same manner he first appeared, out of nowhere, and I couldn't be happier that he's gone. Hopefully it stays that way. I used to do DoorDash on the side, just for some extra cash. Nothing crazy. Until a few months ago when something happened that I still can't stop thinking about. And to be honest, I haven't done a single delivery since. It was around 11 p.m. and I was finishing up my last order for the night. The delivery was in a quiet upscale LA neighborhood. Nothing out of the ordinary. I pull up, leave the car running like I always do, grab the food and drop it off. Super normal and no weird vibes from the customer or anything. But as I walk back to my car, something feels off. I can't explain it, but the air felt heavier, like I could sense something was wrong before I even got to the door. I get in the driver's seat, close the door, and glance in the rearview mirror. That's when I see him. There's a guy sitting in my back seat. Just sitting there, hoodie pulled low over his face, completely still. My heart stopped. I was frozen, staring at him through the mirror, trying to figure out how the heck he got in my car. I managed to stammer out, "Can I help you?" And that's when he leans forward just a little bit and I can finally see his eyes. They were wide and bloodshot, like he hadn't slept for days. He leans back again and, in the calmest voice, says, "Drive." I don't get why, but I did. I started driving with my mind racing, trying to figure out what to do. He didn't say anything else, just sat there completely calm, while I drove through these dark streets, and I'm just freaking out inside, thinking this is it and this is how I'm going to get robbed or worse. Then he tells me to turn down a side street. It's dark, barely any street lights, and I'm just thinking, this is where it's going to go down. But right as we approach a gas station that's well lit and a few people around, I slam on the brakes, throw the car in park, and jump out screaming for help. The gas station clerk runs out and I'm yelling that there's a guy in my back seat. But when we go back to the car, it's empty. The guy was gone. No sign of him anywhere. He just vanished. I have no idea how he got out so fast or where he went, but I didn't care. I got back in my car, locked the doors, and drove straight home. I've replayed that night over and over in my head and it still doesn't make sense. That was months ago and I haven't touched the DoorDash app since. I don't know if I ever will. It's not worth risking something like that happening again. This happened about a month ago and this still comes up in conversation because we genuinely just don't know what happened or was about to happen to us. Posting this story here to hear your thoughts and ideas. It was around 7 p.m. in November, so it was past dark in Metro Detroit. I was driving and my fiance was riding passenger. We were exiting a pretty populated highway when we turned onto a mile road near the city's shopping mall and outlet centers. Being in close proximity to the mall, it was strange the boulevard was that empty at that time of night. So we were driving on the deserted westbound side of the boulevard when we noticed that there was a stopped running vehicle in the middle lane. Again, it was dark aside from the street lights that lined the road every 80 yards or so, but their brake lights were obviously lit and we were approaching quickly. My fiance and I were talking in the car at the time when we both kind of stopped to verbally question what we were both seeing. It was definitely strange behavior, especially since the speed limit is 45 to 50 miles per hour on this mile-long road. You don't want to be stopped, especially this close to people exiting the highway, so we slowed down since we were cautious drivers. We approached and passed the vehicle in the far left lane as it was in the middle, and when we were about a car length in front of it, the driver gunned it and started speeding up to catch us. We never left our left-hand lane, but at this point I was braking, because again, the behavior was off and we noticed their driving was sporadic. Braking was almost instinctual as much as it probably wasn't safe to do so. Continuing to drive down this mile-long road, still no traffic. We can see in either direction. We noticed the driver was swerving their car between the middle lane and the left lane, as if trying to intentionally sideswipe us. Instant red flag, obviously. It wasn't like the driver was intoxicated or texting and just doing a poor job to stay in their lane. This was a driver in control of their swerving and coming dangerously close to hitting the side of my Jeep, going about 45 miles per hour. Bad vibes. Before we knew it, we were blinded by a spotlight coming from the driver's window into my car, via the passenger window. I have 20 tints on my Jeep windows, which usually help control the brightness of the sun most mornings and evenings, and even with the tints, this spotlight stunned us, and we couldn't see anything but white. I didn't have time to check my mirrors before slamming on my brakes. Not sure I would have even been able to see my mirrors after being blinded. I remember my fiance screaming, "What the F?" We opened our eyes and the driver was yards ahead of us, speeding to get away. I had my fiance dial 911 immediately. I don't take BS, so I started racing down the road to catch up to him for a license plate number. In Michigan, we have Michigan left turn lanes, and I could see the vehicle up ahead turning into one to enter the mall parking lot, which is a huge roundabout. The roundabout speed limit is approximately 25 miles per hour with frequent stop signs and intersections. My fiance connected with dispatch on the phone as I was trying to desperately catch up to the vehicle. They were blowing every red light and stop sign in sight. Dispatch recommended we don't follow, but I kind of did anyways because I was really upset and committed to grabbing their plate number, but from a safe distance and at a safe speed. No way was I going to tail this person when we didn't know if they had a weapon or something. Long story short, this driver knew we were following them and they were speeding through the roundabout, cutting drivers off and blowing intersections when we lost sight of them. At this point, the police said the cops in the area were already on their way, looking for the vehicle we described and that we should leave it to them. We weren't going to jeopardize our safety and the safety of other drivers. So we stopped our chase but still crossed an intersection into another shopping center across the street. We saw the driver enter. We figured we could prowl instead of chase in case we saw them again. We never found that car again. Never found out who that driver was, what his motive was, or if the cops found him. We knew it was a male driver because we saw him through his driver's side window before he blinded us. White male, dark baseball hat, and he drove a dark sedan that looked like a newer Ford Fusion. It was a close run-in, and I'm not sure what would have happened if he had successfully crashed into us on that deserted mile road, or if his spotlight had successfully veered my car off the road. We don't think this was a case of road rage since we didn't really do anything to provoke him. To the dude who scared the crap out of us and took away our eyesight while driving a motor vehicle. Middle finger emoji. Edit. A Michigan left refers to a type of turn where left turns at an intersection are not allowed. Instead, to turn left, you must drive straight or turn right onto the perpendicular road, then make a U-turn at a median crossover. And a mile road is part of Michigan's naming convention for differentiating common parallel roads in the metro area and facilitating easy navigation of the region. Dating back to 1815. 37 of these roads, spaced 1 mile apart, exist between downtown Detroit and the northern boundary of Macomb County. The most well-known mile road would be the infamous 8 Mile. When I was 16 or 17, I was coming home to Brooklyn from a movie in Manhattan with my friends. I was the only one who lived in Brooklyn, so I walked home from the train alone. I was used to being out late by myself. I had a midnight curfew, but I frequently broke it because I thought nothing bad would ever happen to me, despite an uptick of crime in our neighborhood at the time. This night, however, I was actually trying to get home on time for once. It was the summer after I graduated high school and I was feeling amazing. I had a little to drink and a little to smoke and I was feeling on top of the world. It was so hot out. I remember what I was wearing. It was like this long sheer cape thing with a very tight and revealing little dress underneath. Not that anything would have probably been different if I'd been wearing shorts and a t-shirt. However, because of my fun outfit, I was feeling myself and being stupid, taking selfies while I walked down the streets and listening to music with both headphones in, not paying any attention to my surroundings. I think I even sang as I walked. I got to my building after finishing my 10-minute walk from the train and walked up the steps to our apartment. We live in a brownstone, with apartments in it, and ours was on the 3rd floor. We had a gate at the bottom of the steps separating us from the sidewalk. I pulled out my headphones and began to fumble with my keys at the top of the steps. Just as I had found the correct key, still humming to myself and thinking about my great night, I heard the latch on the gate clank as if it were being opened. I turned around and I saw a man standing at the gate staring up at me. He was young, probably early 20s, wearing a gray hoodie with the hood up, covering part of his face, but I could see his eyes, and immediately I knew something was off because of how blank yet nervous his expression was. One hand was on the handle of the gate as if he were about to open it completely, but he stopped once I turned around. Somehow my fight or flight instinct didn't kick in yet. It was probably the alcohol. I cautiously called down, "Can I help you?" And he didn't respond. I looked him over more closely and realized that his other hand, the one not on the gate, was moving, fast and low, near his waist. I registered that he was touching himself, gasped, and within milliseconds he was sprinting up the stairs behind me, reaching out to grab me. My brain clicked into place and I started screaming at the top of my lungs as I jammed my key into the door and slammed it behind me. I ran up the stairs screaming for my dad, not even stopping to make sure the door was locked, thinking that if he followed me upstairs, he'd soon be met by my very tall father and our very loud dogs, who slept in the bedroom right next to our apartment door. As I looked over my shoulder while tearing my way upstairs, I saw his face pressed up against the glass window, still watching, but now his eyes were furious. I ran into our apartment, still screaming to my parents to call the police. My dad went downstairs and looked around, but he was gone. The police came anyways after my mom called and came upstairs to take my statement so they could make the report. The two cops who showed up asked me to describe him. I did, and they said they would cruise around looking for him, and regardless of if he was found, a detective would call me soon to make a more detailed report. They never called me. There were many more rapes and assaults that continued to take place in my neighborhood for the rest of the summer. I shudder every time I think about what would have happened if I hadn't taken out my headphones before I began unlocking my door. I don't know how long he was following me for, and as far as I know, he was never caught. From that point on, for the last few weeks before I left for college, I would call my dad and make him meet me at the train station so he could walk me home safely. Now, as an adult, I'm far more cautious than I was as a teenager, of course. I'm always extra aware of my surroundings, especially at night, and I don't look at my phone while I walk home. I'll never get the image of his blank stare as he lunged towards me out of my head, and I'll never forget the feeling in the pit of my stomach as I realized that he followed me home, watching me and doing what he was doing to himself, and was now waiting to strike. It was like being a deer realizing it's being stalked by a tiger because the tiger accidentally stepped on a twig and gave itself away right before it could pounce on its prey. I-22 female was on vacation in San Antonio with a friend for New Year's. In retrospect, I would have picked anywhere else to celebrate, but I had never been to San Antonio before, so I thought it would be cool. When we pull up to the place, it's very obvious it's not in a great neighborhood, but it was extremely cheap and within walking distance to the Riverwalk. I'm no stranger to questionable neighborhoods, so I wasn't too concerned about the area as it was very quiet. On the day of New Year's Eve, my friend got food poisoning and asked me to get them some stuff from the gas station down the road. I wasn't comfortable taking their truck, and since it was only an 8-minute walk, I started heading out. Got to the gas station, no problem, but they didn't have any Pedialyte, so I started walking to another gas station only 5 minutes away or so. This is where it gets sketchy. I'm halfway to the gas station, and I noticed there are two homeless guys walking around outside their tents next to the street I'm on. Originally, I was going to walk right past them and pay them no mind, but when I got closer, I could tell that they noticed me and were staring at me hard. I'm 5'5", not super athletic, pretty strong, but I'm not taking my chances with two grown men. Instead of going straight past them, I turned the corner. I assumed they would go about their business and leave me alone. I hear one of them say, "Hey Randy, come over here," and I glance behind me and see 3 men now following me. They are far enough away that I'm not worried, but extremely cautious. I glance behind me again after a few minutes and they're hunched over, huddled up like they're trying to sneak up on me, much closer this time. I make the smart decision to say, screw the Pedialyte, and round the corner back towards our place. I may be 1 to 2 blocks away when I check behind me again, and they have also rounded the corner and are walking quickly. I start booking it, and I hear the men behind me yelling at me. I didn't look back this time, but I could hear shuffling feet breaking into a run. Thankfully, I made it inside before they could see where I went. I peeked out the peephole in the door and watched in horror as these 3 men came barreling around the corner and frantically looked around for me. They are arguing and pointing around, but eventually they screw off. If I weren't so alert, I shudder to think what would have happened, and no, I didn't get the Pedialyte. I had to get it delivered. This happened around the very early 70s. My family, including my uncle by marriage, were all born and raised in a tiny area in the deep south. This story is told at family reunions, etc., and I have full permission from my aunt and uncle to tell this, but I will not reveal any information such as where they are from and stuff like that. My uncle went away and fought in Vietnam, returned home, and with my aunt, my dad's older sister, was married. While my uncle was in Nam, he said when something bad was going to happen, like something awful to one of his friends over there, or when there was a bad battle with his company, he could almost feel it. He said there would be this terrible sense of dread. Sometimes he would have that dread, like a burden for a week or so before anything happened. Sometimes it would be an hour or so, or anywhere in between. So here goes the story. It was January or February, and the weather had been unseasonably warm that year. My aunt and uncle had only been married for a few months yet. He was going out of town the following day after this incident happened. Job-related. He'd be gone for 2 weeks. He and my aunt were not looking forward to being apart, so it was a Sunday, and they decided to make the day special. He went to church with her, which was something he rarely did, and they decided to splurge and eat at one of the great seafood restaurants, and afterwards, they were going to walk on the beach. My aunt said they were having a great time, seeing old friends at the church, and the restaurant was really good. It was just one of those days where everything seemed right. On the way to the beach they were headed to, my uncle said he began having that same sense of dread that he had when he was in Vietnam. He didn't want to spoil my aunt's fun, so he thought it was like what they call PTSD. Back then it was called a flashback. He was trying to not take it seriously, but he said the sense of foreboding was bad. They got to the beach. To explain something about this particular beach, you had to park beside the road and walk across the wide expanse of sand to get to the water, and this beach was very secluded, especially in winter. My aunt was walking in her stocking feet, collecting shells and having a great time. She loved the beach and still does. They saw another young couple walking also. My aunt and uncle didn't know them. They seemed like late teens in age. Anyways, my uncle said he couldn't fight that bad feeling any longer. He finally grabbed my aunt by the arm and said, "Let's get out of here." She got mad and wasn't ready to go yet, and he was dragging her across the sand towards their car, and they were arguing the whole way. He didn't tell her what was wrong because he even felt like he was probably having a flashback, but he said he felt 100% better when they were in the car and headed home, and my aunt got over being mad. My aunt and uncle said a big car, which had 4 hippie-type guys in it, passed them on the road heading to the beach. Anyway, the story in the newspaper was the following day. My uncle realized why he was having such a bad feeling. These 4 guys kidnapped this guy and girlfriend. The guys were actually local men, and my aunt and uncle had gone to school with a couple of them. The 4 guys were on some kind of drugs. Remember the time in history this was, and they put the guy in the trunk and they took this woman out and assaulted her for hours. They had a gun and kidnapped them from the beach at gunpoint. This shocked the area because it was a very low crime area. If my aunt and uncle had stayed at the beach, there is no telling what could have happened to her, and they would have probably shot him, because he would have fought to try and give her a chance to get away. The law had been looking for these 4 guys all day because the guys had gotten into some other mischief the day before, so the law had a description of them in their vehicle. Hi, I am a female entering my senior year in high school. I've been lurking on this sub for a few days and found myself wondering how the heck so many people have had scary run-ins with such horrible people, but then I realized that I know so many creeps and terrible people myself when I think about it. One in particular has been on my mind lately. I will refer to him under the alias as Kyle. I grew up with him, we're the same age, and have gone to school with each other our entire lives. I have recently found out he has committed a disgusting crime. I'll elaborate on that later, that I did not consider him capable of. I figured to be that messed up, you have to show signs, but I never saw it coming. I thought I would walk you through my childhood with him. Forgive the length of this, I tend to stretch my stories out and I'm sick of keeping this inside. My first notable encounter with Kyle takes place in the 1st grade. He and I were friends, as much weight as that carries when you're 6. Our teacher that year was a hot mess really. She was all over the place and it allowed far too much to slip under the radar. One day, Kyle had successfully managed to hide in the classroom while the rest of us went to lunch. His absence was not noticed until after. I was the first to return to the class only to find Kyle holding my beloved Littlest Pet Shop backpack, which appeared to be cut up. I approach him, who was holding my now unusable bag in one of his hands with a pair of scissors in the other. I address the elephant in the room and ask him, did you just cut my backpack? To which he responds, no, scissors still in hand. He ended up in trouble and was forced to apologize. I never really cared afterwards and we remained on good terms. I always looked back upon this story and laughed, nothing more. A couple of years later, we are still friends and sit next to each other. I and Kyle seem to get along quite well, bonding over our maladjustment and detachment from the learning environment. For me, this could be attributed to severe anxiety and ADHD, but for him, it was something more concerning later to emerge. He was a bad influence for sure, but I was lonely and felt estranged from the girls my age, which led me to socialize with a lot of boys. I felt comfortable because of the crude nature and normalization of violence amongst a lot of these young boys, which is really questionable when I type it out loud. It makes you rethink the societal roles gender plays. He drew gory stick figure fights and crude cartoons, but it seems so normal in the context of other boys at that age. I and Kyle could talk about zombies and action movies and make internet jokes. I thought he was cool and edgy. I had always struggled with math and found it hard to focus, but he made it worse this particular year. He would sit there and tear pieces of paper from his math workbook and then eat them. I once asked the question with the obvious answer, "Are you eating paper right now?" He told me to try it too, so I did. We sat there like lunatics and competed to see who could chew and swallow the largest chunk of paper. How we got away with this is just beyond me. I also told this story in good humor due to how obscure it is. Stupid antics continued and recess roughhousing ensued. Now we are preteens about to enter middle school. I began to reconnect with my female friends and spent more and more time with them in conjunction with my male friends. Kyle had come out as bisexual and later pansexual, and this is where we began to drift. I was raised in a very conservative household and I didn't support LGBTQ rights. I never mistreated my friends who identified this way, probably because I was closeted, but still did not agree with the idea. Kyle and I remained friends but didn't talk much. He was still constantly getting in trouble in school and acting immaturely as other boys began to grow out of their hyperactivity and aggression. In middle school, it surfaced that many guys were made to feel uncomfortable by Kyle's attraction to them when they did not reciprocate. I think we all ignorantly dismissed that as homophobia without the context available now. We hardly talked, let alone about our feelings, but I noticed him growing increasingly depressed and estranged from everybody else. He had become a very disagreeable person and didn't get along with a lot of people in our grade. He was still considered cool and funny to an extent, but I was growing up and beginning to enjoy being a teen with my own life. Other than snarky chuckles and remarks here and there, his demeanor was dull and slightly cold. In high school, I didn't see him at all. I was close with people close to him and heard about him, but we didn't communicate nor have classes together. During our freshman year, maybe even our early sophomore year, I'm not exactly sure, Kyle got into big trouble with administration. He had brought a realistic-looking assault-style BB gun to school in his backpack. In the morning before school started, he invited a few people to his locker to see the fully loaded weapon. I have no clue what on earth he expected to happen or why he wanted to bring it to school, but people quickly caught wind of the contents of his bag and it was confiscated and he was suspended. Tidbits of information like that popped up in conversations, usually followed by a "what the heck is wrong with him?" But he was nothing more than some jerk that I used to do stupid stuff with and get in trouble with. I really didn't think of this kid at all until a few months ago at work, when it happened to discover that my new coworker was also Kyle's sister-in-law. I always knew that he had a large family with tons of older siblings, but I hardly interacted with any of them because they were so much older than us. I only worked with this woman for maybe a month, but I can tell you that she's an absolute sweetheart. Talked about the exciting news for a recent positive pregnancy test and the little boy she had to come. Then we reached the topic of Kyle. At the time, I was oblivious to his recent crime, as it was not publicly released information. I told her stories, including the first two I told you guys, all while laughing. She laughed too, then trailed off and said, "Yeah, he doesn't like me much at all." I think it became the worst when he was figuring out his sexuality. And I was like, oh yeah, I remember that phase. We both kind of laughed and moved on. She asked me if we still talked and I told her no, but I still hear funny stories about him around school. Her smile faded and she looked as if she wanted to say something else about him, but she changed the subject. It is apparent she is uncomfortable with Kyle and I feel bad for talking to him almost fondly, even if I have no clue what has just happened. I didn't even know that he had been placed in a mental institution, let alone notice he was gone. Once she realized I hadn't heard, I don't think she wanted to be the one to break the news to me. I never brought him up to her again. We arrive at the present, well, almost. Last month, I and a friend were talking about this other creep in our friend group who keeps trying to assault people in their sleep at parties. This dude is seriously deranged, like, I fear who he will grow up to be is kind of deranged. And my friend made a joke comparing this dude to Kyle, and I laughed. She elaborated more and expressed her disgust with him, talking about Kyle, and I realized I was missing the full context, so I asked her why she felt that strongly. She told me that he had recently assaulted his younger stepsister and was taken into custody for it. This was a powerless little kid we were talking about, within their own home presumably more than once. Apparently, he's become more of a danger with violent tendencies, a full-blown creep that harasses and assaults those he can take advantage of. There are other people he has harmed, and there will be more, I'm sure. He craves power. People like this don't just grow out of it, it worsens. I mentioned my age in my intro deliberately because something about how young he is creeps me out even more. Knowing that he is free and still mentally unwell, able to carry on and do something worse. I was actually shocked when I heard this because I didn't think he was capable of doing something like this. Especially being a child and his little sister. In retrospect, I can see he was different, but I didn't see any of it as concerning at the time. He finished the school year in person. He walks the same halls I do. The worst part is only a small handful of people know about the little sister thing. I only know because my friend is dating one of Kyle's former best friends and she couldn't stand carrying the burden of this knowledge, so she swore me to secrecy. Of course, Kyle acts as if it never happened, and it didn't carry any weight to him. He told a couple of his now ex-close friends what he did, like it means nothing to him. I see my peers talk to him like normal, and they are completely oblivious to truly know how weird he is. If you read or listened to this whole thing, thanks. I'm sick of holding this information inside. I need to let it out somewhere, if not with my friends at school. My name is Angelina. This happened in 2012 when I was only 15. I am my mom's only daughter. When I was born, my mom had just married my father, and to preserve his real name, I'll call him John. When John discovered my mom's pregnancy, who we will call Grace, he freaked out. He started treating my mom badly. He probably cheated on her too. But Grace didn't want me to not have a dad, so she tried to hold on to the relationship until I was born and John filed for divorce, and then he left town. My mom raised me alone with a lot of effort. John had moved to another city and sometimes sent me gifts for my birthdays. I thought it was really cute, and I really wanted that one day I could meet him. I didn't know he was a bad person until all this happened. Days before my 15th birthday, John showed up, much to our surprise. Without asking my mom for permission, he arrived with a backpack full of his clothes, saying he wanted to spend my birthday week with me. Grace was surprised but still hated him because she didn't even ask for permission, and she didn't want to see his face. I didn't know why, and I invited him to sleep in my room. In fact, he's my dad. What's wrong? I didn't even think about his actions. The whole time he was looking at me, crazy. So far, so good. He slept on the floor with a lot of covers. The day before my birthday, my bed broke, and I was going to sleep with my mom, but John asked me to sleep with him together on the floor because he wanted to wake up with me congratulating him. I thought the idea was cool and agreed. At night, I put on my pajamas and lied down next to him, and just when I laid down, he pretended to be asleep, and then I fell asleep too. A few hours later, I woke up feeling liquid on my skin. When I opened my eyes, my dad was masturbating in front of me and on my stomach. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I realized I was out of my pajamas and blushed with embarrassment. Just when he realized that I was going to scream, John covered my mouth and tied my hands with a rope that spread on the floor. He withdrew his hand from my mouth and told me to be silent. He was going to get a knife from the kitchen. I had no choice, so I dragged myself to the window and screamed for my mom. John and Grace automatically heard. I went behind the closed door to prevent him from entering. My mom's room faces the kitchen, so when she opened the door, she came across my dad naked in the kitchen with my pajamas on his shoulder. She recognized them and took the knife out of his hand. John was unresponsive and ran out of the house, even naked and in my clothes at dawn. Grace called the police, and they found John on a street very close to our house, running desperately with my pajamas covering his face so he wouldn't be recognized. What we didn't know is he had mental problems and was once arrested for trying to assault a girl in the city where he lived. I spent hours in that room crying. To this day, I am traumatized and have nightmares about it, but couldn't live in that house any longer, much less celebrate my birthday. We moved to a place further away from there. I spent a lot of time going to the psychologist, but I'm not 100% recovered from it. We don't know where John is anymore, but I still prefer not to know any more about him. I joined Reddit recently and would like to share this with you, and I hope nothing like this ever happens to any of you. It's horrible, and even today I can't get over it. Sorry this is a bit long. I know this isn't a therapist's office, but this has bothered me for a long time and I wanted to get it off my chest. This happened in June 2018 in Portland, Oregon. I understand I acted like an idiot in this situation. Since then, I've become more observant, cautious, and honestly much more paranoid. I went dancing with my friends and was really drunk by midnight. Unfortunately, this was back when I had little money, and I realized you could save money by eating very little before going out, and it would take far fewer drinks to get drunk. So I was so drunk I barely remember my friend ordering me an Uber home. My phone was dead, of course. I can vaguely recall them helping me get into the car and telling me to get home safe. I don't remember greeting the driver or the first minute or so, but soon after getting in, he asked how my night was and if I smoked. Honestly, I was just thinking about bed at this point, so I sort of just slurred out that I did sometime. He then offered me a joint, and this is the first moment I get sort of nervous and begin paying attention. I tell him something like I'm really tired and just ready to get home. I think he said something about it being an indica-based joint and it was made perfect for sleep. Once again, I say something like not exactly, no, but not a yes, which he takes as a yes. I'll take that joint now. Once again, I'm still drunk enough I can barely see straight or speak clearly, so when he says, okay, well, I have to cancel the ride really quick because I can't give it to you while I'm on the clock, or something to that effect. Takes me a second to realize how dangerous that is, and by the time I start to say something, he has canceled the ride and pulls over. We were in an area just east of the Hawthorne Bridge, I think, and it was totally secluded. Some empty parking lots, a closed auto body shop, and nobody in sight. It's starting to hit me. I'm now in the car, not with an Uber driver, but with some stranger. I can't call anyone, and he's trying to give me weed that could have anything in it. For the next minute or so, we're pretty quiet, or I just can't remember any small talk he tried to make because I was beginning to panic. And every time he handed me the joint, I would take fake hits, just breathing it into my mouth and not into my lungs. I felt tired, clumsy, and weak. That kind of drunk where you're almost at the point of nausea, and I knew I couldn't do much of anything to defend myself at that point. I remember vividly being fixated for a moment on the fact I didn't even have a pair of keys to defend myself with, as my building used fobs for just about everything, and I didn't take my mail key with me. As I'm freaking out, I look up to see if this guy is sort of noticing, and I make eye contact with him in the mirror. He was staring, but I couldn't read his expression. Finally, he says something along the lines of, "Well, let's get out of here." I tell him I'll just call another Uber to get home, thinking at this point it might even be safer to walk, and he says, "No, I still have your address. I'll just take you." For a moment I was relieved. I guess I wanted to believe him so badly that I would get home safe. I believed him. I tried to calm myself down, thinking he hadn't actually done anything threatening. Maybe he was just your typical stoner guy and I was overreacting. This time I lived on the PSU campus in downtown Portland, in the southwest area of the city. He is driving me north on the east side of the river. There are several bridges to our left, and as he keeps moving north, he has several opportunities to take an exit to hop over the river and get me back downtown. He keeps skipping them. I keep passing bridge after bridge that could get me home. Up in northeast Portland, there are some large industrial areas that can get very isolated at night, and Portland in general is surrounded by lots of forests, so I knew he could have me in a secluded area really quick. After he passes like the fourth exit for a bridge, pretty sure it was the Broadway Bridge, I've been racking my brain for a way to make him actually take me home and say something to the effect of, "Hey, my boyfriend is waiting for me at home," which was true, though I said it in a very meek way. My driver says nothing, but he did take the next exit for a bridge and basically hung a giant U-turn that started taking me home. Even as we are on the west side of town heading south, I'm still shaking and have my hand on the door handle, thinking about just hopping out at a red light the closer we get to my apartment. My phone is completely dead, and he honestly still has several chances to hop onto nearby highways and speed out of the city. We're getting pretty close to my apartment now, and I'm once again trying to convince myself I'm being paranoid about some stoner that can't navigate the city. Although a few minutes before I was so scared I was crying. So once we get about 2 blocks from my apartment, I lie and tell him it's easiest to stop here and he can let me out. Again, he doesn't say anything but does slow the car. I'm flooded with relief and even feel myself smile, but when I go to open the door, it's locked. I try to lift the lock mechanism manually, but it won't budge. I look up at him instinctually to see what was up, and he's got his head turned almost fully towards me, shoulders still facing the road, smiling at me. The worst smile I've ever seen in my life. It looked so mocking, and it just did not reach his eyes at all. I just started crying and asking him to open the door. I was so freaked out and still very drunk, and thankfully he did. I will never forget the sensation of vulnerability, not just being drunk in his car with no way to contact anyone. But even as I got out of the car, I kept feeling like he would somehow grab the back of my shirt and pull me back in, as weird as that might sound. When I got home, I find out that my boyfriend had actually gone out with friends last minute and wasn't even home. He wouldn't even have known till much later if I hadn't gotten back safe. The next day I convinced myself I was freaking out over nothing, which I realized still could be the case, but in my gut I had truly felt in danger the night before. Technically this guy could have been totally harmless, but I think I should have texted my friend and had her report him. The big thing that made me think of this was recently hearing about how Ed Kemper, co-ed killer, would go for practice runs picking up hitchhikers and seeing if he could get the passenger or potential victims to trust him, or how far out of his comfort zone he could push them without them saying anything. Obviously this guy wasn't Ed Kemper, but I hate wondering if that night was a practice run of sorts for my Uber driver. Thanks to whoever reads through this or listens to the whole thing. I'm at a point in my life where I'm realizing how much danger I put myself in when I was younger and just depressed as hell, and it made me both surprised and deeply grateful I'm still here. So I was a security guard for this local company in my area. I was assigned to a water park with another guard who was regularly there keeping watch. He was to train me and show me around and tell me what codes open what doors. I first noticed how quick he was to enter and leave the property. He never wanted to spend more than 10 minutes inside the property before he'd be eager to leave. Our first night was simple. There was nothing exciting or interesting going on, so our night dragged. After a few hours, I asked him if he'd experienced anything unusual while working there. He told me that he's had some problems with people trying to enter the property without permission, but that was about it. He also told me he hated working there because of his encounters with these people. He said they creeped him out because of how sneaky they were. He didn't really want to tell me much because he was afraid I would leave the post. That should have been a red flag for me, but I was too excited to let anything like that scare me. A few more hours later and our shift is over, so we clock out and go home for the day. The next night my boss calls me to explain that the security guard, my partner, had resigned. I was a little upset because now I was to work a 2-man post all by myself with barely any knowledge of the place. Fast forward a few weeks, I started to get the hang of the place and created my own routine with no issues at all. No break-ins, vandalism, or anything. It's now 2 a.m. and I was outside at the front of the property completing my rounds when I heard a door slam from inside. I jumped because of how loud it was. As I started to walk back into the property, I could hear doors opening and closing. I could also feel myself getting nervous because it was my first situation I've ever had at this place like this. As I walk inside and start to check the doors and complete a round to make sure there is nobody on the property, I get to this corridor where there is a set of stairs that leads down to a door that is wide open. I walked down the stairs to close and lock the door because I was too scared to take a look inside. As I turned around to head back up the stairs, I noticed a man dressed in all black standing at the top. I take a step back and realize I'm cornered. If he were to try anything, I'd have nowhere to run or hide. So I politely asked him if he needs any help. He didn't reply. I then asked him how he got into the property, and he didn't say a word. He slowly turned his head and snapped his fingers, and then from the left side of the staircase, another man slowly crawled to the side like a dog on all fours. I then turned around and kicked the door open and ran inside and locked myself in a bathroom, as I called my boss and told him what I witnessed. They set an armed security guard to my position to complete a walkthrough to make sure I was safe. As I got the call that the area was clear, I came out and told them everything from the start to finish. I realized that they didn't believe me, so I clocked out and went home for the night. The next morning, I received a call from my boss, explaining that they checked the security footage from the night before, and what they told me horrified me. Every hour, when I would complete my rounds inside the property, those same 2 men would follow me through the facility as if they were stalking me, like as if it were a game to them. After that, I asked for a new position because I was too horrified to work at that water park. I now know why my trainer didn't want to work there anymore. This actually happened to me, and I have more creepy stories like this one from when I was working security, so please let me know if you want to listen to more. I got you. When I was 20, I was a young man living large in my first kind of crappy apartment in downtown Atlanta. I was in a committed relationship with my 19-year-old girlfriend, and she would sleep over basically every night, and since we were in the throes of young romance, obviously we slept naked. Everything was great. One night, still groggy from sleep, I looked up to see a man in the doorway. Frequently suffer from sleep paralysis and almost immediately thought nothing of it, but unlike with sleep paralysis, I was able to move and rub my eyes. That's when the gravity of the situation set in. Luckily, my girlfriend was fully covered, but I was not even in the slightest, and I instantly felt violated, angry, and protective of my girlfriend, so I grabbed a knife from my bedside table, still naked, and went to investigate, which in hindsight was not the best move. Right outside of my bedroom, there was a shampoo bottle from my bathroom and a mysterious substance on the wall and ground, which thankfully the police identified as just shampoo. I freaked out at all the sight of this, though, because this was when I realized that it was not a sleep paralysis demon, but a real person with whom I, butt naked, made eye contact with as I woke up. He left out the back and took my key with him. It was one of those locks that could only be unlocked from the inside, so he effectively stopped me from seeing him by locking me in and took my only key to my place in one fell swoop. Needless to say, my then girlfriend and I got the heck out of there to another person's apartment and waited for the cops to arrive. By the time they did, all of my electronics were gone. He hit a few of my neighbors' places too, but as far as I can tell, he was never caught. My best friend Amelia, 27 female, and I, 29 female, have reason to suspect that we were drugged on Monday night, October 28, 2019. Names changed. I'm going to go through this whole thing chronologically. This took place at a bar nearby a door, called Lobby, that was hosting a horror night. playing 3 feature horrors with sound each Monday of October. I live about 5 doors down from lobby. I trusted the bartenders there. They look out for their female patrons and normally have many as a result. It's a funky, nerdy bar, and I know the staff well from living in the neighborhood. The previous Monday, October 21st, 2019, I went to lobby with my roommate Maria for a horror screening event. She left after the first film, and I moved to the bar and met a guy named Jeff. We talked about horror for hours and seemed to have the beginning of a good connection. Towards the end of the night, I was fairly intoxicated, which was probably evident, as I had trouble remembering his name. I'm not great with names in general, but this was a bit much. He asked to buy me another drink and I declined because I didn't want to get messy. I asked if he was single and for his number. He responded that he was single and put his information in my phone. I followed up the next day and so did he. He suggested going to a movie together and I agreed, but told him I wouldn't be available until next week, but that I would be at next week's horror screening at lobby. He told me he looked forward to seeing me there. I also invited Amelia. Jeff and I texted a little throughout the week, but not much. He seemed interested. At 7, I showed up to the lobby. I noted I was hungry and left to get food. I returned with a huge pad thai dish that I ate my fill of. I was entirely full. I had no interest or intention of getting intoxicated. I just wanted to watch the films and get to know Jeff a bit better. I also have a high alcohol tolerance because I drink a lot in general, and I had been drinking the previous weekend, further boosting my tolerance. Around 7:20, I had my first beer. It was a stout of 9%, but it was a half pint. Amelia arrived at 8:30 at this point. I had just ordered my second beer, a 7% IPA. When she arrived, she tried a sip of my beer, liked it, and ordered the same. I told her I had food and shared some with her. She had a few bites. I had also ordered a glass of water and had it nearby, but wasn't really drinking it yet. Around 9 or 9:30, Jeff arrived and said hello. He asked if I'd been there for long, and I told him I came for the first movie. He told me he'd been at the lobby for 20 minutes, but I hadn't seen him arrive or sit at the other end of the bar. Amelia was to the right of me, and a regular patron called Jenna was to my left. I was excited to get to know Jeff, more and asked Jen if she would mind swapping seats for a bit. Amelia knew I was interested in this guy too, and didn't mind, although she told me later that she didn't like him. She said he came up as having an undue arrogance. Amelia and Jen ended up getting along really well and conversing more intensely. Our drinks were never left completely unattended. Either she or I was there, but I realized that I did get up to pee a couple of times, while Amelia was distracted with Jen, and that's when our drinks could have been drugged. We suspect my water was drugged, as it was the only other item we shared, other than the pad thai. I don't remember thinking much of it until later in the night, maybe 10:30 or 10:45. When I drank it, we think she saw it and drank it too. In the end, I had one more beer, another IPA. In total, I had 2 pints of 7% beer and 1/2 pint from the hours of 7 p.m. to 11:30 p.m. on a full stomach. However, around the 10:30 mark, I started to show signs of mild intoxication. By 11 o'clock, more extreme. I don't remember my conversations vividly. There are texts I don't remember sending. Around 11:20 or 11:30, I asked Jeff if he was interested in me because it seemed that he had been the week before, but now I was unsure. I don't remember his exact response, but I know he declined. I think normally this would embarrass me, but I don't remember feeling that upset. I do know that I was unnerved by my level of intoxication and asked for my bill. It was also to the logical point in the night to settle up anyway. I remember looking down at my bill and it was $24. Then I blacked out. My memory flashed back about 15 minutes later. I was walking into my bedroom and Amelia was in my bed. I didn't know how she got there and was surprised to see her. She was passed out. I got into bed and passed out beside her. We were likely in bed by 12 a.m., so everything happened fast after 11. I don't remember how I paid, and I don't remember saying goodbye to Jeff or any other patrons. Don't remember leaving, unlocking my door, greeting my dog, or inviting my best friend up. I just remember looking at my bill and my memory going black. Amelia had 4 IPAs in total over a slightly shorter amount of time, enough to make her buzzed or even drunk, but with her tolerance not enough to mess her up like that. She remembers drinking 4 beers and feeling good, slightly buzzed. Remembers liking Jen and not liking Jeff. She remembers having some of my water. After 3 beers, she got her bill, around 10:30 or 11, with no intention of having more. However, a little while later, she ordered a 4th. That's the last thing she remembers, and she doesn't remember drinking the beer, paying for it, or how she ended up in my bed fully clothed. Thankfully, we were unharmed. My best friend and I presumably left and crashed together. We woke up the next day genuinely baffled about our night and unusually hungover. 2.5 beers has never been enough to make me feel drunk, let alone hungover. Amelia felt the same. While 4 beers was enough to make her feel like a good buzz, it wasn't enough to make her feel that drunk and that unwell the next day. We were both unable to recall any additional details during our blackouts. The hangover, which made us feel nauseated, tired, and confused, lasted the entire following day and night. She experienced a headache as well. We both experienced an exhausting brain fog. We can only suspect and don't know anything for sure. All we know is the night didn't add up. We experienced an extreme and unlikely level of intoxication for the amount we drank. Because we don't even know for sure if we were drugged, it's foolish to then suspect anyone of drugging us. But she and I ended up having conspiracy theories anyway. We figured both ended up with a split dose, which is why we both got messed up and were also okay. Hence why I think it was in the water. Jeff had access to my drinks. He probably assumed I would be alone like last week. He saw me drink more the previous week and might assume I would again. But why reject me? Why even drug in the first place when I showed up with a friend? There's not a viable plan to get me out and no motive. There's another possible suspect, if I can call anyone that. Somebody I see around the area a lot and who always gives me the creeps. He was there the week before. He stayed the whole night last Monday, but it's almost too convenient and he'd have a harder time getting anywhere near our drinks unnoticed. Or maybe it was someone random just trying to create chaos. Amelia is getting her blood tested today, but likely will never know or be able to confirm or deny it. I'll talk to the bar just to give them a heads up. Be careful out there. What do you think? I had to think about it, but I believe this happened in the 6th grade. It's hard for me to believe that this took place 20 years ago. One thing I don't remember is what our science project was exactly. All I know is that I got partnered up with this kid in my class named Brian. He seemed like a chill kid at school. He was chubby, quiet, and kind of shy even. When I went to his house to work on our project for the first time, he was apparently much more comfortable and seemed to be very outgoing. He made jokes and laughed a lot more than usual. Kept saying stuff to his mom in Spanish and then they would both laugh at me. But I never thought it was really that mean and I would laugh along, even though I didn't know what they were saying. Usually right afterwards, he would tell me what they had supposedly said. At one point, we were in his room and he asked me to go ask his mom for a line of paper. I told him I didn't speak Spanish and he should go ask her, but he said he would just tell me how to say it. I don't remember exactly, but he told me to say something like it. So I went and asked his mom. I knew something was off right away just by the way she looked at me, like I had said something crazy. She grabbed my hand and walked me to the bathroom like I was a special little boy. Once we were in the bathroom, she pointed at the toilet paper with that confused look still on her face as if to say, "Where the heck else would it be?" I was confused and could only speak to her in English while she spoke to me in Spanish and we didn't understand each other. Soon we heard Brian having a hilarious laughing fit from the other room. Laughing so hard like he thought it was the funniest thing ever, but I was pretty sure it was only kind of funny. I wasn't worried though and I laughed it off. Aha, you got me. Eventually, he became really excited to show me something. He told me he'd be right back and then he ran out of his room. He was gone for a minute or so and then returned, telling me to follow him. He was so sure that I was going to love whatever he was about to show me, so I was excited too. Couldn't wait. We get outside and he goes to this little shed and pulls out a lawnmower. He tells me to follow him. He started the mower, began walking, and then gestured with his hand again for me to follow him. As we walked, we rounded a corner and there on the ground was a net full of frogs. There were maybe 20 or more frogs in there. I didn't have time to stop him. Right before it happened, we looked at each other. Him looking at me to make sure I was looking and me looking at him in pure confusion. He pulled back on the mower, raising the blades, and then let the weight of the spinning blades fall down on the writhing pile of frogs. The mower bogged down just for a split second, and there was a sickening wet crunching sound, followed by chunks being spit everywhere as he raised the blades back up. He raised the blades and let them fall on the pile of frogs 4 or 5 times. All the while he was staring at my face and laughing maniacally at my horrified reaction. He released the bar and the mower went silent as he crumpled to the ground and began rolling around on the grass laughing. A couple of frogs escaped without getting blended. A few more frantically scattered away from the mower, missing limbs. I awkwardly laughed with him and played along like nothing bad had just happened. I never get disgusted to the point of throwing up, and it's hard to disgust me at all. But from that point, I definitely knew there was something wrong with Brian. And until now, I've never told anyone. I wouldn't say that I was afraid. It was just that I didn't think it was a good idea to tell anybody what had happened. Not his mom and not my friends. Not my parents, not my brother or sister or best friend. I didn't tell anyone anything about it, and Brian never did anything like that again or mentioned it. It was the weirdest thing. They say it's the quiet ones you've got to watch out for. I haven't seen him since 6th grade ended, but sometimes I wonder just what kind of person he turned out to be. I've never been a girl who has scared easily. I routinely watch crime shows, horror movies, and stuff. However, a night in March 2005 changed all of that for me. I was attending college for music in 2005 and had recently seen one of my favorite violinists. Inspired, I had asked a pianist friend to accompany me while I played a piece. Looking back, it wasn't smart on our part to go at night to the college's music practice rooms, which are nearly soundproof and separated from the rest of the building. I figured since it was across the street from the campus police headquarters, we would probably be okay. Was I ever wrong? My friend and I are in the practice room for about 15 minutes when she looks at me and says, "Don't freak out, but there's a guy with a mask behind you." Now, this is college. There are plenty of stupid people doing stupid stuff all the time. When I turned around, I realized this was something much more sinister. There, crouched on the other side of the practice room's glass door, is a thin guy about 5'7", maybe 5'8", wearing a thin blonde curly wig. The Groucho Marx glasses/nose combo thing, a hideous shirt, just a personal judgment, and the creepiest smile ever. That's right, no pants or underwear, just his small penis out. When I turn around, he waves and enters this tiny practice room. My friend and I try to remain calm because we honestly don't know what to do. Then this guy tries to strike up small talk with us and mentions he heard me talking about my favorite violinist. Apparently, he's been standing outside the practice room the entire time. He knows our names, where I had gone that day, where our hometown is, my guy problems at the time, etc. As soon as possible, my friend and I booked it out of there. He was blocking the door most of the time, so we were really scared. As we were leaving, he says, "Let's do it again," with my name. Of course, we go to the campus police department immediately, and they think it's all pretty funny. The next day, I'm sitting in choir when the dean comes in and says, "Hey, a friend of your cousin stopped by today. He said he wanted to give you some CDs of my favorite violinist. He asked for the girl who played violin with your first name, so I assumed it was you." I tell him what happened and he's furious because the campus security didn't do anything. That's when the stalking began. He soon was clever enough not to go by the music office again, but my dorm neighbors would tell me a guy was looking for me to give me some kind of gift. One time a stack of CDs from various violinists was sitting in my assigned seat for choir. Another time they were outside my door. All the while the campus security is doing nothing. Some people even suggested that I should enjoy the attention. Things died down when I finally moved off campus and stopped altogether, when I moved away from the college town. Until 2 years ago when I moved back to the same town. The first week back, I received a direct message on Twitter saying, "Glad you're back. I've missed you. Let's get together and listen to. Insert violinist name here." I reported it to the police, who haven't caught the person to my knowledge. All they knew is the address came from somewhere other than my city. Part of me is still waiting for the knock on the door, or a present left at my work or home. In Pennsylvania, right near the border into Delaware, there is a narrow, eerie place with deformed trees, closed-off paths, and lots of legends. It is formerly known as Devil's Road, the main attraction in a place called Satansville, which encompasses the whole of dark twists, isolated roads, and unsettling encounters. It was written about in the book Weird Pennsylvania, which highlights the creepy places of the state. According to many rumors, there is a cult house hidden in the woods surrounding the road, and any trespassers on the road, especially those who stop, will be chased out with a black or white SUV or truck. For years, I had read about the place and heard spine-chilling stories until I couldn't stop thinking about seeing it for myself. My friends Matt and I spent almost every Friday night at the mall together, as teenagers do. As expected, it can get pretty boring pretty fast, especially with no money to actually have a motive to shop around for anything other than disappointment. Visiting Satansville without telling our parents became another weekly tradition of sorts after he told me about his experience a month before our first visit. He had told me that when he visited with his guy friends, his phone service completely cut out, leaving them without Google Maps in a potentially dangerous, unclear area that was already scarcely mapped. Soon after, he told me, a black truck came off of a dirt road and followed closely behind them until they found the main road. It wasn't much, but it was enough for me to be hooked. Not too much happened on our first few trips. We would see other cars rarely, as it's a hidden road that is no longer marked due to excessive theft of the street sign. Occasionally, the cars would be black in color, and we would get a rush of adrenaline. It was fun, but not exactly terrifying, until one night. We finished up at the mall around 6, and we left with enough time to circle around once or twice in daylight, and the remainder of the time in the dark. It was about a 40-minute drive to Satansville from the mall, and I was tingling with excitement. According to the legends, cars that visit frequently are more likely to have experiences at this place, and this would be our third time visiting in the last few weeks. Instead of Matt and I going alone this time, we brought our friend Lola, who was very outgoing and would likely have a sense of humor in a situation that we'd be too scared to continue in normally. We drove down the highway and finally made the first turn, leading to the seclusion. Matt and I had pinpointed several areas where we thought the cult house may be, but stopping on the road is illegal, so we never had a real chance to explore. At least, that's the logical reason I give in lieu of us being major cowards. The ambience immediately changed as we entered Satansville, and the cool night air flooded through the cracked windows. In the first few turns, other people aren't entirely a rare sight. A few trucks pulling out of driveways they like. However, the turn onto Devil's Road never loses its wow factor. The trees on both sides of the narrow road lean away from the forest aggressively. Not just a tilt, but completely bending in the trunk away from things we could only imagine. We were approaching the first major bend in the road, and a car was coming up towards us. It was a tight squeeze, nearly impossible for two opposing vehicles to pass. The presence of a car alone was enough to cause a twinge in my gut. Matt was focused on squeezing by while turning, and Lola was too busy cracking jokes to see what I saw, but I have never forgotten the face since then. I looked over to the white Jeep to my left, and the window was incredibly tinted but half down, looking back at me straight into my eyes like he had been looking at me long before I looked to him. He was a young man, maybe 25, with long blonde hair, a deathly pale face, and horribly thin fingers on the steering wheel. He was not at all focused on driving, as his eyes pierced me, and this is the worst part. His neck was turned completely towards me, while the rest of his body was completely straight forward. This may not sound creepy, but it was not normal to bend that way. He said something, but I couldn't hear him over Lola and Matt, laughing at our antics. I couldn't break his gaze. I was stuck staring at him until finally Matt passed the bend and he was gone. I kept checking the rearview windows, terrified with a feeling I'd never quite felt before. When I could no longer see the Jeep, though it felt as though he could still see me, I quietly asked my friends if they'd seen him. Neither of them had looked at him nor felt anything unusual. I was pretty unsettled, yet excited to see what else would happen. We turned off Devil's Road, but were still in Satansville, preparing to loop back around, when we passed a little shack that always housed two black trucks. There was no sign of any other drivers, and we wanted to stir the pot a little bit. We stopped for a few moments and honked the horn and flashed our blinkers, and then kept driving. We also blasted Old Town Road for some reason, because that was our peak of comedy at the time. We looped back around, and were back on Devil's Road when Matt stopped mid-sentence to adjust his mirror. In the darkening distance was a black truck. We giggled with nervous excitement and kept driving. It was exciting, but it kept a reasonable distance, and I think we all kind of assumed it was a coincidence. That is, until we turned off Devil's Road once more and saw that there were no trucks parked by the shack anymore. We lost the truck when we turned on the main road to circle back around again. We circled around 2 more times, nervous but skeptical, and not much happened other than an ass-riding white SUV that kept blinking its headlights. Not going to lie, that freaked us out. And the return of 1 truck to the shack. This is where it gets really intense. On our 5th loop, we were all very tense. The aura had changed to heavy, and it was completely dark at this point. Things had started to feel more ominous. Probably from the slightly less passive actions taken towards us by whoever was there. We went down the bends, peering nervously into the woods. Some trees were marked with 666 and upside-down crosses. Marks of other, more ballsy teenagers, and there was a distant light in the woods. Courtesy of who knows what. As we turned off Devil's Road, but still in the heart of Satansville, headlights appeared behind us. It was impossible to tell what kind of car it was as it was pitch black and we had just turned the first major bend. Moments later, the truck appeared behind us, speeding. We were going about 25 probably, and the truck must have floored it to catch up, and it drove uncomfortably close to us. I was the one to see it first. It was a black truck, windows tinted and driver unknown. We drove on for a minute, freaking out and turning completely behind us like creepy Jeep guy. But more normally. Soon, a second truck joined behind it at a fork in the road, and they revved their engines as if in communication. The truck sped up, nearly crashing into us, and we were forced to speed up. This continued through many intense twists and turns where our speed reached up to 70 at the maximum. They flashed their lights, kept speeding up and getting closer. At this point, we were losing our stuff. They were definitely either going to run us off the road or catch us and do who knows what to us. They had these weird red lights on the tops of their trucks, and the light was reflecting off every window in our tiny Honda. Just above a small hill, the main road was visible and relief flooded us. We panicked again, though when we realized we would have to wait for traffic to slow before we could turn, and they would definitely catch us. With nothing else to do, we stopped and glanced behind us. The trucks were gone. We all expected a sudden ambush, but made the turn onto the highway and started home, talking about what the heck just happened. Came to the conclusion that the trucks had probably turned onto a dirt road, only visible to those who know it's there, and that they were chasing us away from their activities. Like the rumors say, what were they doing exactly? We have no idea, and we have no intention of finding out, as we hadn't been back since, and I still can't get the face and presence of the man in the Jeep out my head, and this was over a year ago now. I was a teenager in the 90s, and on this particular night, had found myself stuck downtown. It was around midnight when I finally found a semi-well-lit bus stop. I looked at the bus schedule and realized I may have missed the last bus of the night, unless it was late. I decided to wait on the bench. Moments later, a tall man walked up and sat right next to me. There was plenty of space to sit elsewhere for him, but he huddled up nice and close. He was wearing all black, including a black leather jacket. He started making smooth conversation with me, and I finally looked over at him. He was very tan and had shiny wavy black hair and orange eyes, like bright hazel orange, snake-looking eyes, which contrasted with his dark features and clothes. He really looked like the devil in person to me. He took off his leather jacket and laid it across my lap to keep me warm. I took it off and handed it back to him and said no thanks. He kept draping it back on my lap. I looked around for other people and only saw a passed out homeless person sleeping on the bench. He was trying to coerce me into getting a ride with him because it's so late and he was worried about me. And my bus isn't coming, I'm not safe. I said, no thanks, my bus should be here any minute. In my mind, I didn't know if the bus would be here at all. The streets were dead and dark, and I was scared to leave the only spot that was well lit. After what seemed like an eternity, my bus finally came. It was the most beautiful bus I'd ever seen. I quickly got up and said, my bus is here. He sneered at the bus and said under his breath, you got lucky. I got on the bus and saw out the window him walking to his car in a dark parking lot across the street from where the stop was. He stood next to his car waving at me to come to him, as if that would change my mind. It obviously did not. I was a wild teen that partied a lot and would stay downtown all hours of the night and thought I was an invincible. But after that incident, I never stayed out that late again, especially alone. I really did get lucky and had no intention of pushing it again. I went to school in New Orleans from 2010 to 2012, and I encountered the scariest man I've ever known while attending. My friend from high school and I both lived there at the time. We met up to smoke a small joint on the outskirts of a nearby park. She was struggling heavily with money, for both tuition and everything else, and I was smoking her out for a pick-me-up. While smoking, a man emerged from a white house across the street from the park, one of the nice Garden District homes. He carried his bike over his shoulder and was headed straight for us. We quickly put out our joint when we saw his eyes locked on us, and we initiated friendly conversation. He introduced himself as Ty. He was tan with piercing blue eyes, probably in his late 30s, and seemed pretty athletic. We asked if the nice house was his, and he said he was staying with his friends. He ran back and retrieved 2 beers for us, both unopened, so we accepted. This was a poor choice, but he was insistent. We were already pretty high, and we were a little afraid that he would screw us over if we said no. He pulled out a ring of cards while telling us how he was a model, refusing to tell us what exactly he'd done in the past. The cards all seemed pretty worn and old, but he insisted that they were his press passes. He noticed immediately that I was asking some overly specific questions, and it was pretty uncomfortable, while my friend, much more trusting, was enthralled. He latched onto her, telling her that he was doing a shoot in New Orleans for the Saints, working for ESPN. She would be paid, he said, and saw her light up upon hearing this. Her phone was off, so she told me to give him my number to communicate. I was pretty mad at this point. He kept making backhanded comments intended to make me feel like the outsider for questioning him. It's not for everyone. This is how you make it in this world with a pretty face. And things of that nature. Putting on a show of fawning over my friend. Sociopaths tend to single people out like that, I learned. I soon heard from him on a daily basis. He would ask how his little lady was doing, my friend, ask for her Facebook and ask for her class schedule, and I told him that I doubted she would be okay with that. She would have been, but she was playing a dangerous game, so I tried to intercept his advances. He found me on Facebook soon enough, though my information was not linked to my number, and I was receiving messages constantly asking for my friend. I thought that if I blocked him, he would continue to hunt me down in crazier ways, or tell somebody about the weed. Young and stupid. So I allowed the barrage of messages. I refused to help him and made my friends aware that he was starting to scare me. I was leaving town with my friend a few months later for Christmas, and told him the week before we actually left that we were both gone indefinitely, as his messages got more and more aggressive as time went on. He freaked out, but it seemed like he would leave me alone in the end. However, every time I went to the park, which was daily in my last week because I was smoking a ton of pot after finals, just keeping it real here, I would see him on his bike, circling the track around the park. I didn't think much of it, nor did I think he could see me because I was with a group and away from the track, and he never acknowledged anyone being there. The day before we actually left, I received several blurry images of the original friend and me lying in the grass on the different days we came together, which wasn't every time I was there. It was obvious that we were smoking pot, so again, young and foolish, we didn't go to the cops. When I got back to my dorm on the same day, placed on the sidewalk by the back entrance I always used, which was rarely trafficked, was an ESPN press pass with the name Tyler Durden, piercing blue eyes staring up at me. It was like it had been laid right in the center of the walkway. That was probably the most frightening moment of my life, and I packed up and stayed with a friend until my flight out. I received phone calls from numbers I didn't have throughout Christmas, making my life miserable. Every sound in my house I feared would be him, finding me at the address with my name attached to it. He was livid, texting in all caps from various numbers that I was a little liar, that I was just a stoner and I was never model material and I was jealous of my smoking friends, implying that he knew of more than just one of my friends. That liars get raped and he would destroy my pothead life, and he'd go into really weirdly worded babbling rants that scared the ever-loving shit out of me. I was scared to tell anyone in my life. I was the good kid who had gotten herself into the stupidest situation. I just hoped he would move on. A week before I was supposed to go back to school, he just stopped. From daily rampages and rants to nothing. I was so relieved until in February I checked my email to find a crime alert warning students of a serial rapist going by Tyler Durden, who lured women to his home, gave them alcohol and assaulted them. His real name is Dean Kelly. A has-been model from an Aerosmith video, baiting, stalking, and assaulting underage girls at schools in Chicago, Texas, and New Orleans. He keeps making it out of jail on bail and contacting his victims, pretending to be other victims who want to talk. Thankfully, I'm not one of them. Screw this guy. I still live in fear years later. This happened a few years ago with my friend June when we were maybe 17 or 18. I'm 23 now. We were out driving around late at night on country back roads. We were teenagers growing up in a rural area, so going for a drive was one of the main ways we passed the time. We were both into goth stuff and witchcraft at the time, so we pulled off the side of the road to walk around a small graveyard in the woods. It was impossible to see at night, but we'd gone there a few times the day before just to hang out. The whole area is heavily forested, but the path to the graveyard is short. It's right next to the road, just barely hidden in the woods. Anyways, we started slowly on the small loop that takes you around all the gravestones, using our flashlights to read the names and look at the carvings of the stones. I was very comforted by graveyards and the night at the time, so I was honestly very relaxed, and we mused about ghosts and death and whatnot as goth teenagers do. About halfway around the loop, at the furthest point from the car, June got my attention as she'd noticed a light in the woods. It looked far away, like it could have been a car on the road, so we turned away and kept walking. However, about 30 seconds later, she got my attention again, and the light was much closer and obviously quickly moving towards us, and then I heard the sound of someone crashing through the woods. It was obviously someone with a flashlight making a beeline toward us, and we backtracked and ran to the car. I unlocked it and climbed into the driver's seat, turning the car on as fast as I could, and right before the lights came on, this huge grisly-looking man, dressed head to toe in camouflage, carrying a huge crossbow and wearing a headlamp, busted out of the foliage and was coming right for the car. He has this manic look in his eyes that just made me want to escape this even more, and I reversed as quickly as I could and peeled out of there. We didn't stop driving for a while. Even though we never saw him following us after we drove off, we both couldn't shake the feeling that we were being followed. Finally, I think we both got too tired to stay out any longer and we went back to our houses, but I still constantly think about how quickly he got to us. If we hadn't sprinted right when we did, he would have caught us as we were getting into the car. I literally slammed my door about a second before he came barreling out of the woods towards us. Plus, the fact that there are no houses nearby. This person was waiting in the woods in full hunting gear with a weapon. And we clearly weren't animals as we had a flashlight. And there was a no trespassing sign in sight. The whole area around this graveyard is state park. I go out into the woods and into weird places in the night a lot, and I've seen some stuff I would consider supernatural that really scared me. But none of those things ever truly made me afraid to go into the woods like he did. I still go out on my own, but I never let my guard down like I used to. So, this started on one of those meet new friends apps. I'm not just a huge loser, I swear. I moved to my current city during the pandemic and have a work from home position, so it just hasn't been the prime circumstances for a social life. I matched with this random girl that we'll call Annie. I can't remember if I saw her first or vice versa. Honestly, I was paying more attention to the profiles than the pictures, and she seemed okay. Spirituality came up somehow. I can't remember how this happened either, and to be fair, it could have been either of us. I've recently been more seriously following Norse paganism, but it wasn't something I was seeking to explore with other people. It's mostly a private thing, not to mention my own beliefs are more metaphorical. but that doesn't mean I'm close to the experience entirely. So when she mentioned having an LGBTQ, neurodivergent Pagan femme coven, I was like, okay, wow, that's either very specific or very broad, but hey, why not? Maybe it'll be fun. So we agreed to meet first before I went to the event. One weird thing that stuck out in our text conversation was that her partner was in some bizarre Scientology rehab. At first, I assumed this was a place where one recovers from Scientology, but I did ask her if her partner was a Scientologist. I didn't get an answer. We only met for an hour to have coffee. I think more red flags would have popped up if we had more time, because the little things that went off on my radar were things that weren't that weird. Like they were explanations, or I decided to give her the benefit of the doubt, and my dumbass didn't ask again about the Scientology thing. I kept meaning to Google Scientology rehab, but kept forgetting to do it. I've since Googled it and can't find anything about a rehabilitation for ex-Scientologists, so I wish I'd done that sooner. There were, however, other things that stuck out. They're relatively benign out of context, but putting everything together in retrospect made me feel dumb. She wouldn't answer any direct questions about herself, and not for lack of asking. I'm the kind of person who is conscious of when the attention is all on me, so it made me uncomfortable, and I didn't learn anything about her really. Most of what she had said had to do with her spiritual awakening. Her spiritual awakening itself sounded weird as heck. She said that she had a realization that she was like a lighthouse that was drawing people toward their personal enlightenment. And, okay, I did think this was weird, but, like, she's from California. I don't know, maybe that's kind of normal. I just chalked it up to her personal beliefs being whatever they were. Reincarnation came up. Reincarnation is a big part of paganism, although Asatru additionally focuses on your ancestors. She told me she didn't think she had any past lives and was a new soul, which didn't make a lot of sense, but okay, whatever. Not my circus, not my monkeys. The vaguely supernatural element she placed on herself was strange, but I know a lot of people want to feel special. That didn't mean I had to believe it. At one point, I told her about this random woman I met at the pagan festival who tried to con me. She wanted to charge me so I could be under her wing, or whatever. I don't need someone to protect or guide me, so I declined. As I was telling this story, I could tell Annie was conflicted. Like she wanted to agree but didn't. Finally, she said something blasé, like how it was only inappropriate because the student should choose the teacher. So I clarified that I did not want a teacher. Her response was very mirroring, and I'm not a moron. I was getting a weird sense that she wasn't being honest with me, that she was telling me things that I wanted to hear, and I told myself that she was probably just nervous. I have a strong personality. I'm very independent, so I can understand if somebody wouldn't want to go up against the things I said at our very first meeting. I know I'm just dumb at this point, but I didn't want to be paranoid. I don't trust people easily, and I know that, so I was trying to loosen up and be more chill. Yeah, that was a big mistake. So I go to this thing. Immediately, it's weird, guys. Immediately. The second I step foot in that house, I'm uncomfortable. It's filled with people and completely silent. Everybody's looking at me. I'm laughing and saying hi, and no one is like really responding. And here I am awkwardly dropping my keys and phone while everyone is just watching me. Eventually, I take a seat on this short couch because there's no room in the large circle. It's a very small living room and there are like 20 people circled up. There's a cushion on the couch, so I sit on that. The leader starts talking, and as she's going on, I'm looking around at the people there. I was curious. Out of the corner of my eye, I see the leader trying to look at me. The girl sitting in front of me is partially blocking our view of each other, so the leader is like leaning over to try and meet my gaze. Finally, I felt awkward enough to like shift over so that I was leaning against the arm of the couch. Staying perched on a cushion was uncomfortable by that point, so I shifted off and spread out a bit to be more comfortable. The leader ended the speech with, "So, spread out, I guess," which was clearly directed at me. It was said with some humor though, so I wasn't sure what to make of it. Everybody introduces themselves and are their own unique brand of neurodivergent. I'm ADHD, but I guess I don't subscribe to labels beyond the requirement to stay medicated. I've been medicated since 2015, so this isn't a new diagnosis for me. That was the only question we got asked about ourselves beyond our name. The leader guides us through this meditation, and people are making these weird breathing sounds and hums. I get it. It's spiritual, right? Unfortunately, my ADHD ass can't focus to save my life, and it's impossible for me to follow the guided meditation. I do not understand. How can anyone with actual attention issues listen to past trills and deep noise breathing? So I'm sitting there with my eyes closed and barely paying attention, because I can't. But I do hear the leader say that we should think of anything we want to ask her or need from her, and that got my attention. What the heck did I need to ask her? Other than where the snacks were, because I paid $8 and don't see a single one. Once the meditation ended, Annie and the leader walked around to give us material for an activity. Annie gave me 2 long pieces of twine, and the leader gave me 2 sticks. As the leader was handing me the sticks, I asked her where the snacks were. She was like, in the kitchen on the table where the snacks tend to be. I'm a dry, sarcastic person, so I thought it was her brand of humor. I laughed and played along with, oh, alright, I think I'll find them. Literally, she was deadpan, unsmiling. And then walked away. So stupid me thought she just might be like that, but then I saw her laughing with the other girls and realized something was off. As the activity commenced, she went back over to Annie and started stroking her back, kissing her hair and giving me this creepy smile. Yeah, it was very weird. I was so uncomfortable I wanted to get up and go, but I couldn't. Why? Because of this damn activity. The activity was the last straw. They wanted us to think of something we wanted to discard that brought us pain. Then they wanted us to feel how bad that thing made us feel as we slowly twisted the piece of twine around the stick. That's stuff I would only ever do with my therapist. Obviously, people were emotionally melting down before long. I wasn't comfortable doing the activity for obvious reasons, so I sat there awkwardly with the sticks and the string in my lap. I was the only one not doing it, and it was obvious. But because I wasn't doing it, I had the opportunity to watch Annie and the leader, and it was chilling. Annie was doing some weird pyramid thing above her head with her arms. There were a lot of references to her being a lighthouse or some sort of guiding figure throughout the meeting. She was the only one who wasn't doing the ritual, other than the leader. They were both running it. Suddenly, it occurred to me, as it probably did to y'all already, that Annie had just been using this app just to bring people into their group. She was the only person who seemed to know everyone, yet no one there knew each other. Even the name of the group now made sense. They weren't being specific, they were casting a wide net. And I had this big realization in a handful of seconds. It made my stomach turn. So yeah, I was done, but I couldn't get up, because people were sharing their experiences and stuff, pouring their hearts out. This was the most messed up part of it, in my opinion. There's no reason to do a releasing ceremony that forces people to feel their trauma, especially at the very first meeting. It's also inherently manipulative because it requires people to let their guard down. Then they can quote-unquote save the day by showing people how to release the very same pain they just inflicted. But that isn't the fault of people there, so I didn't want to disrespect them. Like people were crying on top of my shoes that I left by the door. I had to wait for the best time to ask somebody to pass them to me. Finally, I got up and told everyone I had to go to the car, then took off. I texted Annie and told her I wouldn't be back and that I hoped she found her people. Just make sure you're not her people. Be really careful of any spiritual ceremony or practice that demands vulnerability from you, especially directed by people who don't know you beyond a name. Annie, let's not meet under any circumstances, please. And if y'all ever hear the term neurodivinity, run. If ADHD made me divine, then I'd be on my 94th incarnation by now. Hey folks, I'm kind of new and this is the first story I've submitted here, so let's get started. I must clarify that this didn't happen only to me, but to my uncle too. This was after the Christmas Eve party, when everybody went home. I decided to stay because my cousin and I were watching a movie. My uncle, who used to walk his dogs into the woods next to a park, went out to take them out. Before this, my aunt told him not to do that because it was too dark out there. It was around 4 or 5 a.m. He didn't care much and he went off anyway. My aunt was still worried, so I went along with them. Once there, anything wrong seemed to happen, everything was quiet. My uncle and his dogs were having a relaxing walk, and I wasn't really paying attention to the surroundings when suddenly the dogs went still. This wasn't that strange. They always stopped on their way to stare and bark at other animals they noticed, like rats or birds, even insects or other dogs. However, this time was different. When the dogs got still, my uncle and I noticed something that was going wrong. The dogs weren't angry or curious, they were actually kind of nervous, anxious, or afraid. One of the dogs, the largest one, was growling and shaking. As my uncle started to get worried about the situation, we heard it. People in the woods. We didn't see how many because of the darkness, but they were saying something. We all gather here, by the blood of incomprehensible, we incomprehensible, the in thy incomprehensible, etc. As my uncle and I heard that, he yelled for his dogs to follow him out of the woods. As we all left, he turned his head back and he only saw a slight movement of branches and shrubs, perhaps because these people were trying to hide. After all that happened, he hasn't walked his dogs near these woods, nor when it gets dark. So, to the strangers in the woods, let's not meet. I haven't posted an experience in some years, but this one happened recently. I was behind the scenes at the restaurant I was working at, waiting to clock in for my shift. That's when I first noticed her. Starboat Girl. This chick loves that gothic kids movie about the blue-haired girl and the button-eyed doll. The clothing associated with the marketing of the movie is always a dark blue bow with silver stars. Now, when I'm not at work in our dress code, I'm usually goth or close to it. I enjoy looking more like a rock star than wearing just jeans. And yes, I own jeans too. I just prefer to wear darker clothes, so I immediately noticed this girl because of her bow. I remember that movie, even though I'm an adult, so I make a mental note that, maybe this chick is alternative too, and I might get along well with her. Fast forward to a few weeks later, now everyone else avoids this girl. I notice, but figure people are being mean. I admit she is kind of weird, but weird never scared me, so when she starts to say hi, I politely say hi back. I pick up a shift on a day I don't normally work, and she's there waiting to clock in. After exchanging greetings, she starts to engage and we talk a little bit. I like to joke a bit at work, so I say something kind of edgy and she laughs. And I clock in and that was it. I didn't notice until later, but I never used to work with her. I mean, barely. We work in different areas of the restaurant, so it was whatever it was, and I don't really think anything about it until one day. I'm at my lunch in the break room, which is quite a walk from our restaurant to get to, and more like a bungalow that is attached behind the property. I am sitting at one of 6 tables. Each table has 2 chairs. Starbo sits right across from me. I look up for my chips and dip, and there is no one else in there but her and me. She asks, "Can I have a chip? I forgot to bring a snack for my break." At first I'm thinking I don't like to share my own food with people I don't know. I'm just not raised that way, so my instinct is to say no, but she flashes up the dough eyes and I crumble. "Yeah, sure," I reply. She scoots my dip out of my hands and under her chin and proceeds to grab fist after fistful of my chips and chow down. It's like a movie scene. It actually made me sick. I'll spare you the details, but this chick double dips, slops, and belches. Yeah, no thank you. My food is done. I am not eating after that. I make up an excuse to head back to our location. I'm pretty upset, but at the end of the day, it's my fault. I mean, I said she could have some. I feel like she guilted me into it. Never again, I tell myself. A week later, click, clock in for my shift. Guess who is standing behind me? Starboat Girl. She doesn't normally work today. I don't normally get anxious, but she is making me feel that way. I avoid saying hi and duck out to my area to work. On my break, here she comes. She is walking behind me and says something about spending break together, and I say, "No, you go on. I gotta use the toilet." And I fast walk towards the bathroom. At lunch, I'm not so lucky. Plops down at my table. The room is virtually empty. Maybe one guy half asleep in the back. I'm on my phone scrolling and eating my TV dinner. She asks if I am having a good day. At first, I completely ignore her. Then she gets louder. I say something bland like, "Just hanging in there." I was in the middle of my meal, and my box from it was still sitting on the table. I'm quiet, ignoring her, playing on my phone or pretending to. Starbo starts picking up my trash and reading it. I'm taken aback. "What are you doing?" I say. She slowly says in a casual kind of way, "Just curious, what you're eating." I am so upset. I want to do something, but something she can't get me fired for. I start talking about really macabre and Debbie Downer stuff, anything I can think of. I tell her my opinions on canceled forensic shows and Armageddon, tragic accidents, and everything I could do to put a bitter taste in her mouth. I figure this girl is too weird for my blood and too creepy even for me to have a friendship with. I'm overly excited about my newfound rise to turn this girl off that as I'm talking, I finish my food and a noodle goes down the wrong pipe. Great. Now I'm choking. I'm freaking choking. This girl might be the last person I ever see. I can't believe it. She turns to me and says chillingly, her eyes turning dark, "You're going to die from that." More determined now to live than my thinly little gothic mind ever was, I tell myself, "Find water," and I will myself over to the water cooler halfway across the break room. Luckily, we had paper cups, which sometimes ran out. I chug water and cough and gasp, and finally, and obviously because I'm typing this, I survived. But I am fuming angry at Starbo. This chick wouldn't even get me water. I get it. I was turning her off, but this whole thing started because she was stalking me. I grab my stuff and go to my supervisor and report it. My supervisor is so lax. Says the company can't do anything. That she is within her rights to be around me. I keep avoiding her. The last time I saw her, she came up behind me before she clocked in and stabbed me with her pointer finger in my back. Smiled at me when I turned around to see who it was, and ran to go clock into her area for her shift. Now she works the same shifts as I do. I think she changed her availability to be near me. I also think she has been getting breaks and lunches close to mine, so she can come hunt me down in her breaks. I really don't know what to do besides report her or make up an excuse again to leave if she finds me. Back in 2008, I was a student planning to go to university and needed some extracurricular stuff I could put on my entry applications. As most UK students know, one of the best to have on there is the Duke of Edinburgh Award. As part of this award, you have to embark on an orienteering expedition, basically a long trek through woodland and rural villages following nothing but a map and a compass. No GPS allowed. It is a teamwork experience, and you camp and overcome hurdles together. Anyways, I was out of shape at the time, and so my uncle volunteered to take me out of the middle of nowhere to get some idea of what orienteering was like. We didn't stay out overnight like what I would have to during the real thing, but we hiked maybe 10 miles through woods in a small village in pretty abysmal weather. By the end of the journey, we were soaked to the bone and pretty miserable, looking forward to getting back to the car and heading home. For the last part of the journey, we were on a dirt trail heading uphill with bushes and trees on either side. We were marching onward in silence at this point when all of a sudden there was a rustling in the foliage to our left. From behind a large bush stepped an old man in a black suit with a red bow tie and dress shoes. He looked late 70s, early 80s, very pale with liver spots dotting his face, and a gray/white comb-over. I was instantly weirded out. Who dresses like that to go into the woods? The instant thought seeing a guy his age out there in those clothes in those weather conditions was, this guy's lost his marbles. There was something else that took me an extra moment to notice, though. That absolutely puzzled me. The guy was bone dry, didn't even have mud on his shoes. We stopped in our tracks and just stared at the man for a moment, who appeared to be as frozen and shocked at seeing us. My uncle made the first move, taking a step towards him, asking him if he was okay. The old man continued to stare for a moment, not moving even a twitch, then became suddenly very animated. It was like he suddenly snapped out of a trance. He started flailing his arms wildly, saying something awful had happened, that a good friend of his needed help. He began walking backwards into the woods, motioning for us to follow him, which we did. We started off at a brisk walk and then escalated to running as we struggled to keep up with the man. After about a minute, he disappeared ahead of us, but we could hear him, so we continued to follow the noise until we reached a huge slope. We stopped at the edge and looked down to see the old man standing at the bottom, motioning us still, pleading with us to follow him. I remember looking down, and the slope was probably at a 40-degree angle, spanned for perhaps 50 feet or more, and was slick with mud. It looked like an accident waiting to happen, especially given there were no shrubs or roots to hold on to anything. I remember looking down at the old man on the other side of the slope and wondering, how the heck did he cross that so quickly and so cleanly? I mean, at that distance, it is hard to see fine detail clearly, but I swear he still did not appear to be wet or muddy at all. I and my uncle looked at each other, and I saw that he was getting as weirded out as I was. Despite my feelings, I made a step toward the edge and was going to try and make my way down when my uncle grabbed me firmly by the arm and pulled me back. Under his breath, he said to me, "Something's wrong here." We took a few steps back from the edge at this point, and the old man at the bottom started getting irate. He began pleading with us again to come down the slope, telling us that he needed our help. His friend was in major trouble. My uncle shouted down to the old man that he would head back to our car and call emergency services for him, that professional help would be on its way soon, that they would have all the tools to help him. The old man suddenly got furious. He began jumping up and down, demanding that we come to the slope right now or we would regret it. His voice had changed drastically. He was practically growling his words, his hands bunched up into fists, pounding his knees like an angry toddler throwing a tantrum. I've never seen a grown adult fly into such a rage in my life. His eyes looked like they were on the verge of bursting out of their sockets. His skin had gone from pale to red in almost an instant. We began to hurriedly make our way back the way we came, his demands and threats getting less audible as we got closer to the trail. Once on the trail, we practically power marched the remaining quarter mile or so to the car. All the while, my uncle was on the phone to the emergency services, explaining to them that there was a possibly mentally ill old man wandering the trail. We were ordered to get to our car and await the police so we could show them where we had encountered him. About an hour later, we met 4 officers, 2 of whom had dogs with them and packs of supplies like first aid, emergency blankets, and stuff. We led them to the exact spot and then pointed the 2 officers with dogs in the direction he led us through the bushes. The search lasted all weekend, but there was no trace of the old man. Officers said the only trail they could pick up had been mine and my uncle's. They didn't find any footprints or anything belonging to the old man we encountered. One of my weirdest experiences to date.